Greetings everyone, this is P and welcome to a brand new tutorial about Call of Duty 4 single player map making. My previous tutorials were pretty basic and this one's gonna be pretty basic as well, but this time we will go in depth in some details that you all need to have in mind. First of all, I will show you how to actually install the mod tools themselves after having installed the base game. Then I will show you most of the useful folders you need to have in mind and how to use them. And then I will try to explain every step of the way of making one simple map as best as I can, as clear as I can, because it is a very hard procedure that if you want to do it, you need a lot of patience to do it and a lot of guidance. And I'll try to do that here. So as you can see, I have this little program over here so you can see exactly what I'm typing. So I won't have to explain what buttons I press and stuff. Okay, so first of all, we have a fresh Call of Duty 4 installation, updated to 1.7 version. The mod tools, if you read the README, they require your Call of Duty 4 to be updated up to 1.4 version or above. So yeah, we have, this is the game folder. This is the same thing. We'll talk about this later. So first of all, let's go into the mod tools folder. So this is where I downloaded the mod tools zip files. This is the version 1, this is the version 1.1 update that we're gonna need. This is 7ZA, which is a software we can find online. I believe it's free. It is required for the mod tools to work, so you can create mods mainly. It's not really necessary for maps, for standalone maps, but it is necessary for mods. So you will need it in your mod tools if you want to make actual mods for the mod tools. Anyway, so I have the folders extracted here. So in order to install the mod tools, let me just put this here and then open the game folder. This is a fresh Call of Duty 4 installation, updated to 1.7 version. So this is how the game looks without the mod tools, and this is the mod tools folder with all the necessary tools. By the way, MP tool and SP tool are not supposed to be run. They are run by other applications in the mod tools. They are not supposed to be opened normally like a game. They're just there for other tools to be used from. By the way, if you're gonna use the mod tools, make sure to read the license and the README. They are important. It's good to have them in mind in case you use these mod tools. Okay, so how to install mod tools in the Call of Duty 4 folder? You just select everything, copy, and then paste. That's all there is to it. So now with all the files of the mod tools copied to our main directory, we basically have our mod tools installed. But there are some more steps that we have to do before they're properly set up and ready to use. First of all, let's install the patch right now, the update for the mod tools. As we can see here, we won't need the update readme, we just need these two files, copy. Then in the bin folder, the corresponding folder, of course, replace the two existing files. It's just a small patch that fixes a small error. That's what the txt says. Okay, so now that we have the patch as well, also we need to copy the 7ZA in the bin folder, preferably. This is where it's supposed to be. Now, our mod tools are successfully installed, ready to be used, ready to be set up first, of course. So, first things you need to do. First of all, make sure that your game runs, your single player at least. I will not really go into the multiplayer part. This is mainly for the single player, but we will show you just how to set up the mod tools, the first steps. Okay, so without further ado, let's go to the bin folder where all the tools are located. So all the necessary applications you need to create mods, maps and edits in the game are basically in this folder. The main programs and applications you need to have in mind are, first of all, the compile tools in here, this application, which basically has shortcuts for almost everything, which is what we need to make a shortcut of right now before moving further. Then you have to keep in mind the assets manager, which is mainly to import files to the game, import assets, import models, textures, materials, lots of stuff. It's a lot to get into, so I'm not really going to explain further about that. It's a lot of things that we can't cover in this tutorial. Then we have the effects editor, which is self-explained. And then we have Call of Duty 4 Radiant, which is the map editor. And mod builder, of course. I personally don't use that. It's not really useful to me. I use a command line to build mods. Anyway, we won't get into mod building in this tutorial. So yeah, just noting about mod builder before we move on. So yeah, Radiant is basically the map editor of the mod tools of the game. We will also make a shortcut of this. Very good. And now just keep this folder open over here and this lowered over here. So now we have those two. We have the compile tools of the of Call of Duty 4 and the Radiant. So first of all, we will have to start the compile tools. We will have to set in the preferences the file, the folder path of the game directory. In our case, it's in my D drive in Call of Duty 4. The example we have above is the default location that Call of Duty 4 is usually installed. So yeah, since we have it in the correct destination, then it should work fine. Then in level compiling, we can see the levels provided us with the mod tools. These are source levels that have been given to us with the mod tools. So we can see how they did stuff and just make our way, which is also hard. So I'm gonna just lay down the path for you. This is where we build the levels, where we compile levels, but in the Radiant is where we construct the levels, like how we design them. Now there is the scripting part, of course, which we're gonna talk in depth a little bit later, but this is not done in any of these programs. We just need a text editor for that. So in the applications tab, we have a shortcut for Radiant, a shortcut for the effects editor, for assets manager, and then we have this little button over here, which is very important to talk about right now before we do any work with the mod tools. We have to keep in mind that we have to click this button here, Run Converter. So this Run Converter is basically going to, it's explained over here. It says that it will set some appropriate settings for the game, for the mod tools, for the assets manager. It will generate some files necessary for you to create maps and stuff. So you just have to, before you do any work, before you even open Radiant, preferably, you will have to go in the compile tools and press this button, Run Converter. It will open a command console window. It will do its thing. It may take a while. Let it finish. It may also show some errors, but this is normal because the mod tools have some imperfections that they reflect in this Run Converter thingy anyway. We'll talk about this later. Just click it and wait for it to finish. So the converter is over. There are two errors. Like I said, there are some imperfections in the mod tools. We'll just talk about them really soon. We can just press any button to get rid of this window. And then we are ready to use the mod tools. But before we do anything, once again, we have to go back to our mod tools folder where we got the mod tools from. Go into the raw folder. Just follow my steps, nice and easy. Then in the materials folder, then do the same thing for the Call of Duty 4 game folder. Go to the raw folder, materials folder. Now we have the material folder from the mod tools download itself and the materials folder from the mod tools which we installed. Now the Run Converter has an imperfection of deleting any materials that are not assigned in some source files. And in this case, this imperfection here for some reason deletes the material for the M4 and for the M16. So whenever you create a new map with the M4 on the M16, it will be invisible unless you take the material file from this folder, to the mod tools folder you work on, from the source folder we got the mod tools from. That's what I mean. So we just have to search for M4. And we see it here, material weapon M4 M16. We just copy it from here and paste it in the Call of Duty 4 folder. You can see it wasn't here before because it got deleted. So it didn't ask us to override anything. So with that out of the way, we are absolutely ready to start using the mod tools. So first things first, we need to create a map. Like I showed in my older tutorials, we need to open Radiant, Call of Duty 4 Radiant, which is the software where we're making the maps. The very first time we will launch the Radiant application, it will ask us to browse to a project file for the Radiant. We need to do this the first time we open the game. I will show you exactly where it is, in the mod tools, in the Call of Duty 4 folder. So yeah, it appears that the window didn't pop up on my end because I have the mod tools installed in another directory in this PC and it already has the settings necessary. So whenever you open this program the first time in your mod tools, it will show you a window asking you to find a project file, and I will show you exactly where to find this file. It's in your Call of Duty 4 directory, bin folder. It's this one right here, Call of Duty 4 PRJ project file. You'll just have to select this file whenever this window asks you to select the project file, and then just click OK, and it will not ask you to do this again, and you will be ready to use the Radiant. Now, first things first, mapping. Mapping can be quite difficult because it needs a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of patience, because it's really hard. It's basically the way the developers created the mod tools. So I'll go quickly through the functions and mechanics of this editor as simple as I can, as fast as I can. So we have the 2D view over here, 3D view over here, and texture view over here. We have a lot of tools up here. I will quickly explain what most of them do, the most important of them actually, and I will also try to explain the controls as best as I can. So first of all, let's just create something so we can have a point of reference to understand where the camera is moving. So to create something, you just have to create a brush, for example. Brushes are the basic core fundamental construction base for every map in Call of Duty. Brushes are just rectangles, like cubic rectangle objects that we create to generate geometry in a map. So to create a brush and to see how a brush actually is in our map, we just have to hold left click in the 2D grid and then drag, and like that we create a brush. Having a brush created, it will have a texture assigned. The texture selected in the texture window will be applied to the brush created. If we want to apply a different texture to the already created brush, we just have, let's take this nice yellow texture, we just have to have the brush selected and select the texture we want to apply. Now, how to select a brush if we have it deselected? First of all, how to deselect the brush? Just press escape. Then, to select a brush, either in 2D or in 3D, preferably in 3D, because in 2D we may have many things layered on top of each other, we just have to hold shift and then press left click to select anything in the Call of Duty 4 editor, preferably in the 3D editor, because it's better to see what you select and what you don't select. And then we can just reassign new textures in our liking. Now, how to move the camera? There are many ways to move the camera, like the arrows, as you can see, or these buttons to change the angle. And there are some more, but I personally prefer holding the right mouse button and moving left and right and front and back. This is my favorite way. I use it for years and it's pretty successful. It has led me to where I am in map design. We can just move around by the mouse we can just move the mouse around by holding the right mouse button and moving the mouse left, right, front and back. There are cycle modes of the camera in here, and you will have to click this a couple of times to get into this version of moving. Now, to move up and down, you just have to hold control and just move the mouse up and down while holding both control and the right mouse button. And you can move left and right at the same time, up, down, left, right. By releasing control and having still the right mouse button hold, We can just move forward, left, turn left and right, just as I said before. So these are the basic fundamentals. Now, you may be too high up and you want to look downwards. How would you do that? You will have to hold all three: right mouse button, control and shift, and then by moving the mouse you can look around in any direction. Now be careful, because if you look too high up you can just do a 360-degree backwards and just go like that. So yeah, try not to get too dizzy yourself with that. Oh, by the way, how I move my camera like that: I just hold right click on the 2D and then I just move my camera around. I can just use a scroll to scroll in and out. I forgot to mention these things, better late than never. So these are the basic fundamental camera moving controls that will get you around in Radiant. At least this is the way I used it, and it's really useful to me. Okay, so having all that out of the way, we need to understand how grid works in the 2D grid. Actually, how the 2D grid window works. This is pretty important, because this is where we structure the map itself, how we measure distances, how we align stuff, which is very important, and where we actually draw our surfaces in our grid. You can see I can increase the grid density and spacing by pressing the numbers in the in my keyboard, and you can see that this actually changes the grid. Now if you want to manually do that, you can just go in this grid button over here and you have all the grid options you can. You can also unsnap from grid, which is not really suggested from my end unless you have real trouble aligning in the lowest grid. Anyway, so grid is important because if we want to create a wall, we'll have to do this. And then if we want to create a thinner wall, we can just go one grid lower and do this. You can see it's a thinner wall because we are in a lower grid. Now, in 2D grid, in the 2D view, I mean, we will want to view a more like there are three axes, X, Y, and Z. So right now we're viewing a top-down view of the map by default. The first time we open the editor, it will show us a top-down view of the map. To change our view angle in the 2D grid, we can either press this button, change views, or hold Ctrl and Tab. Hold Ctrl Tab again to have a different angle, and then hold Ctrl and Tab again to go back in the top-down view. Let me just create a simple wall over here. Now I will go to the other view so we can make it taller so you can see the effects of it, and then I'll go to the other view to make it longer. Now we'll go back to the top-down view, and this was just a basic demonstration to show you how angles work in this editor. Anyway, now like I said, deselecting a brush is just deselecting anything that you have selected in the editor is just pressing escape. Selecting it is just pressing shift, holding shift and left click on the object. That's all there is to it about selecting and deselecting. Now, only for brushes there is a face selection option, because this texture, this brush has the same texture assigned in all of its sides, and we may want to have a different texture in this side, a different texture in this side, and a different texture in this side. To do that, to select just one face of the brush and apply texture. This is only to apply texture. Don't try to select one face to move it and stuff. It's not gonna work. So to simply select it, we just hold shift and left click. Okay, to select just one face, we just hold shift, control, and then press left click. Now we have one side of it selected. We can just apply texture only to this side. We can see how nicely this works. This is really important because you don't want all of your brushes, all of your structures to have all of their sides textured the same way, and there may be many surfaces that one side of them is visible to player and the other side is not, and this will consume quite some memory, and you don't want that. You want this side to be transparent. Speaking of transparent sides and memory consuming methods, we can now go to the textures part of the editing and go to usage. Now this is this is something you should use pretty often. You can go textures, usage, and you have many options here as for what kind of textures you want to use. Now, Call of Duty requires you to use some tool textures for structural design, because you will need your map to be structured in a proper way. So the most common tools you will be using are these two over here, and some of the clip as well. So either this or that will work for the basic structure of your map. So for example, if you haven't decided what textures you want to use, it's best to build your maps using these two textures. One of them, you can, of course, one of them is shadow. It will not allow sunlight or any kind of light to pass through it, while the other one will just be like, it won't cast any shadows. That's what it is. That's the main difference. So yeah, they're solid structural material tool texture you can use. Let's just select the whole of this brush and apply the color texture. Now, color textures are basically what we need to design the basic structure of the map, as I said before. Now, as you can see, I'm drawing a huge color texture below my wooden surface over here, my wooden brush. Now you can see it's not thick enough. I really want it to be as thick as this grid. I really like this grid personally. You can see by pressing 4, it's the 8 grid, grid 8. It's my favorite grid. It's the most useful grid for me anyway. So next thing I'll show you is how to spawn entities and how to assign entities and stuff like that. So in the 2D grid, just press right click, and then you will have this menu over here, these options over here. These are entities and assets you can spawn in the map. You can just place in the map. They are really useful. You can spawn props, models for example. You can add lights, actors, which are NPCs, and weapons, triggers, and many useful stuff that your map will need. First of all, we will spawn a player start. We will just press that, and then you have the player entity ready to be used. By the way, I forgot to mention in the 2D grid there is this sidebar over here, which is always showing the height. Like if you want something move upwards and you don't want to change your view over here, you just select this thing and then do this without having to change views over here like that all the time. Okay, so we have our player entity over here, and we can just move it around. It's best to place these things in the 2D grid just to make sure they're aligned. Like I explained in my older tutorials, placing any spawners for AI or the player, it's best to keep just a little distance above the ground, just to make sure they won't fall below ground. It's a countermeasure that we better take to avoid glitches. Going back to the top down, now we will need to rotate the player view, because by default everything is rotated to the right. Like the player right now is facing to the right. You can't see it because there's no indication of it, because this entity's angles are 0 and there is no arrow pointing to the angles it's viewing. So everything spawned in the editor is looking to the right. We want, for example, let's say our player will be here and we want him to face this way. To rotate anything in Call of Duty 4 Radiant, we just have to press R. By pressing R, we enable the rotate mode on objects, which can also be used by pressing this button. Now I'm pressing R again. We're now in move mode, in the default move mode. Now I press this button again. It's the same thing as pressing R, and we are in rotate mode. Now to rotate, let me just go where I have to. Okay, so we're here in the player spawn. We want to rotate it to look to the center of the map over here. I'm pressing R to enable the rotate mode again, and then I just have to hold left click and just move it up and down. And now you can see the arrow appearing, which shows us where the player will actually be facing when spawned. And that's where we have to put it. Of course, you can see that it's quite the rotation is not smooth. It's snapping to the grid, and we can change that by changing our grid. It rotates depending on the grid we have. That's important, no? Now if your rotation, no, that's irrelevant. Okay, so this is the rotation we want to have. I press escape once to disable the rotate mode. I press escape again to deselect it. Now it's above the ground, as we can see. And now I want to show you something that is also useful. So let's say you have the player like this, and let's say you use a very low grid to move him, and you're like, okay, that's fine. You see that it's not snapped on the grid you want it to be snapped to. This can either be a model, an object, or even a brush. Let's say this brush, for example. I do the same thing. I do it like that, and you say, oh no, I want this align. What should I do now? I should go back to the grid and do this. But yeah, it's not always that easy. As you can see, if I zoom in here, it's not easy. So in order to snap something to the grid in all of its sides, let's just break it. Let's just make it too small like this. You can see it's now quite misaligned in most of the grid sides, if not all. So to re-snap every side of it to the grid, we just hold Ctrl and G, and now it's snapped in all sides. If you can see here, it's snapped really nicely. It just matches itself to the selected grid of the time. Like I said, the number 8 grid, which is enabled with the 4 button. Okay, so without further ado, let's move forward because we are wasting a lot of time explaining the basic mechanics. Now I will also show you now how to alternatively change the angles, which is an introduction to the entity window. So by selecting any entity and pressing N, we have this window popping up, which is called the entity window, and we can see what stats our entity has. The class name is what defines the entity. The class name is basically player star. We can't change that. We shouldn't change that. We shouldn't really mess with that if we don't know what we're doing. Okay, angles are the angles. We can change them manually here. Let's say 100. You see the angles change once I press enter. Let's go back to the one we were. The origin is best not to be messed with from this part. It's best to be normally changed this way. Now you see it's not updating. You have to deselect and reselect it in order to update for some reason, because it's a 2007 game using a Quake 3 engine anyway. So this entity window is very useful, a very necessary tool, a very necessary window we will be looking into in the later parts of the tutorial. Let's see what we did so far. So we learned how to move the camera, how to create brushes, how to assign textures, how to spawn player, how to change grid and stuff like that. The rest of the tools won't be really seen, only some of them. I'll explain what I mean later. So we need to just create a basic map right now. Let me just select those two and delete them. Now we will just have this huge wooden ground and the player on it. That's all we will have in this map. I have this colored texture underneath. I will use this as a base for my skybox. So to create a skybox, let's go to the skybox right now. To create a skybox, we have to go to textures, UJUDs, sky over here. The sky textures are not visible in the texture window because they are 360 images, and I don't know, they just couldn't have. They didn't make a system to properly render them here. Anyway, we don't care about that. So the sky I will select is Sky SP Airplane. There we go. It's my favorite sky of the game. So you can see that it's assigned over here. It's working as a 3D, as a 360, I mean, shader texture. But now it's not where we want it to be. It's underground. It's on a flat area. It's not gonna work as a skybox. So what we need to do is to actually create the skybox. I will expand this brush quite a bit, and then I will go to the other 2D view to just expand it upwards and a little bit downwards, just to create enough space for our test map. I'm changing my views again. Now I'm in the top down view again, and you can see we have a huge cube surrounding our player and our flat surface. So this is still not gonna work as a skybox because it's just a huge cube which we are into it. We're not viewing any sides of the skybox, which is not what we want. So how do we create each face of the skybox being actually a hollow cube, which is what the skybox is? So to make this hollow without having to create each side individually, which will take a lot of time, we can just press this little button over here which is called hollow. By pressing this, the cube that we had selected is hollowed in a way that it can work as a skybox. Now this is our skybox, okay? You can, I'm going to that right now. So you can see that the further I go, this thing disappears, right? If I go too far, everything will disappear. This is because Radiant, the map editor, is having a cubic clip camera view enabled, which makes things disappear if they are too far, in order to make the editor lag a lot less. Because if you have tons of models, entities, brushes, like a lot of geometry, a lot of assets in your map, it will be very laggy if you render them all at once in the Radiant. So yeah, it is necessary, especially in big maps. And I can just simulate, that disappeared because we have filter the skybox off. We have filtered it off. I can just click that. This is the filter. We open that by pressing F, as you can see in the keyboard. I press F. We have various options here. Sky on, sky off. It's best to, after you create the sky, it's best to filter it off, because there are many accidents where people try to select something from the top down view and they select the skybox and accidentally delete it, which will cause serious compiling problems and possibly our map broken and not knowing why. I was talking about the cubic clipping, which is the render distance. So let me just demonstrate. By pressing U on the keyboard, you show only the used texture in your map in your texture window. That's pretty useful when you don't want many textures shown here. By the way, in textures you have texture resolution in case you have a low NPC, which I don't think you have. Texture filter, not much to see. Texture window scale, which you can scale the images appearing here. Anyway, there are some options over there. Anyway, I was about to demonstrate the cubic clipping distance. I shouldn't really be delaying that much, so I will create some pillars in the sky and I will put them away from each other. Oh, by the way, what I just did is to clone the pillar by pressing space. Space just duplicates the pillar and just moves it a little bit to let you know that it's duplicated. We can do the same thing by using Control C, Control V, but then it will be in the same exact position. It just have to be moved away. By the way, moving brushes, just holding and dragging, and then stretching brushes can be conflicted sometimes. Like, you want to move something, you will do this. You want to stretch something, you won't do this. You want to stretch it from outside of the selection area and move it from inside the selection area. And if you have like tons of stuff selected and you want to move them without stretching them, like, how will I click them all? You can just hold Alt while moving them around and they will not stretch. Those are all useful trivia controls that you will need. And I just throw them whenever I remember them, because they're useful. You will need them. So yeah, let me just create many pillars to show you how cubic clipping works. There we go. You see, the further I go, they disappear. The closer I go, they appear. Now you can change the render distance by holding Control and then pressing the curve bracket button, or if that's what it's called. So you can see it in my keyboard display over here. I press this button, I keep pressing it, more stuff appear. You expand the limit of the cubic clipping, and if I can press the other button to reduce it, expand and reduce. If you want to entirely disable it, you just have to click this button and everything will be visible at once. If you have a huge map opened, it will lag a lot, trust me. So you don't want this disabled while in a huge map. For this map we can easily turn it off and not worry about draw distance, because there are too few things to render. So what we basically have so far is one large ground area. It's best not to... Oh, by the way, having a skybox created, you should never put anything outside of it, or nothing should go below it, through it, outside. Like, everything should be inside your skybox. This is very important. Keep that in mind. So, I'll just change the texture, by the way. I will use a ground texture and I will go to the grass texture. This is the most generic grass texture in the game. Pretty useful, pretty handy texture. So before we go any further, let's just save our map, because let's say, for example, we did a lot of work so far. We want to save our map before moving any further, just to make sure we won't lose anything if the game crashes, if the editor crashes, or let's say if the power runs out. Like, so to save, you can either click this button, apparently, or just click File Save or File Save As. So this is the save destination you should have. This is the Call of Duty 4 game installation you have, and this is the map source folder. This is where your map design files should go, which are .map, of course. These are text files, basically, that can be edited in Radiant, which are translated into 3D and textured meshes. Anyway, too much detail for that. Anyway, we just save this as test map 1. So the name you decide to save your map as will be the file name of your map that you will have to remember and use. You should never start a name with a number, and you should never use spaces or special characters, because these names are used by code, and code doesn't like these. I mean, numbers in the front of the name and spaces. You just keep that in mind. So we click save, and our map is saved, and whenever we hold Ctrl and S, we just save our map. There is also the preferences window if we press the P button, which has various options we can do. We can just do autosave every 5 minutes. I personally don't use that. I save myself. I'm a responsible mapper. I save my stuff often. Anyway, so with that out of the way, we have our map saved, and we can move to the next part of just creating a functional basic map with all the details I explained so far. So let's just put the player in the edge of the map to simulate the beginning. Okay, now as I said, we don't want all sides of the of each surfaces selected. So let's say we want to texture every other side except the top one. We can of course go to textures, use tools. Let's go here, just press the caulk, and then just go back to the textures, use ground, go back to the grass texture and select the one side like I explained before and do that. But there is another way. We can just select the whole thing, then hold Ctrl and Shift and deselect one of the sides, and then we can apply caulk in it like that, without having to assign and reassign the texture like I showed before. Anyway, saving. Now, to create a very basic map, we need a player spawn, a skybox, a ground to walk on, and a reflection probe. So reflection probes are basically generating 360 images for reflective surfaces to appear like they have a reflection or something. They are necessary for your map. Do not forget to add at least one of them, or else your map will probably look like reddish. Every reflection of your map will look too red, and it will not look pretty, trust me. You just need one in each major area of your map. Try not to put too many of them, like we definitely don't need more than one in this area. So yeah, after reflection probes, we will need the only necessary tool texture that we need for our map to function properly, which is light grid volume. Do not confuse light grid volume with light grid sky, and in no way don't confuse light grid sky with the skybox itself. They have no correlation to the skybox. Don't confuse them. It's a fatal mistake for the map. So light grid volume is all we need, and light grid volume is basically lighting information for your map. If you don't put it, your map will most likely have rainbow colors for some reason. Anyway, so the areas you need light grid volume at are every area that your player has access to in your map. So in our case, it's the whole ground texture. We can just put it like that. It will have to cover the player's height, of course, but just don't put too much of this. Like, put it only in the areas that your player can go. In this test map, this is more than enough, trust me. Okay, I have filtered this off like I explained before. There we go. So that's all we need to have for a map to function. Now our map is ready to be compiled. Before we start doing this, of course, we will need to add some Worldspawn settings, which are basically the lighting settings. Let me just filter light grid off for obvious reasons. Now before we go to light grid settings, I will show you how to place props and actors, just to show a basic example of that. So to add props and actors, like I explained before, we have this list over here. MISC models are the objects, the models we put. Actors are the NPC. Let's just place Price, the classic hero of Call of Duty. Woodland, there we go. We just have Price over here. Or wait, you know what? I will just... Okay, we just have Price over here. I rotate him like I explained before. Escape to disable the rotation mode, moving him close to the player. Okay, we'll go into NPCs a little bit later, just placing an NPC to show you how it's placed for now. Okay, now I'll place a model, MISC model. So this window pops up and you have a list of models over here. This folder that has opened is located here in your Call of Duty 4 directory in the folder raw that we will see very soon, and then in the X model folder. That's where all the model files for the game are located. They are compressed, they're a coded file, they're a hard coded file. You can't just export them like that. They're just here to be used for Radiant. You can't just export them and stuff. This is the folder where you need to navigate in case you are lost in this browsing window. That's why I show you the location. So you have, most of the models have a preview over here. We can just use the arrows to navigate. Let me just put this a little bit higher. Let me just put this a little bit higher so you can see it clearly. We can just navigate to the models. There are plenty of props and models we can use. We even have the body models. I have browsed through them a lot of times, trust me. So yeah, there are a lot of stuff, tons of stuff, like mostly everything that is used in Modern Warfare 1. So we'll just put, let's put a barrel. Let's put a, no, not a barrel. No, that's a backhoe. Let's put no, just something. A crate. That's great. A crate. This is a crate, straight from Call of Duty 2, by the way. So we have a crate object over here. We can move it same way with brushes. It can't stretch. It can't. It's not working like a brush. For example, you have a brush, you can stretch it and stuff. No, it's not like that. Same way with brushes. We can move it. We can't stretch it, so there's no need to hold Alt. So yeah, having a model here, we can just clone it or copy paste it like that, or select them all, clone them all together, just place plenty of boxes around like that. Now we can see that they're above the ground and we can try to do this. It will work, but sometimes we can't really see if it's exactly in the ground. In this case it is, because we're snapped to grid perfectly. but sometimes our grid may not be perfect, our terrain may not be perfect, and a lot of stuff. So in order to snap objects down to the ground, we have to have this selected, force drop height to 0, and then press this. Now if we want the objects to align with the angle of the terrain, we also have to press this, but this is not relevant in this case, just trivia. So press this and then they snap to the ground exactly and precisely as they should. So this is just to avoid floating objects like we often see in games, but yeah, it's not always working. Even in Call of Duty you can make mistakes and these will not be always aligned because, you know, we're humans and we make mistakes. Okay, back to the compiling. We have our light grid, we have our reflection probe, we have our player, and we should add the we should now add our Worldspawn settings. So Worldspawn settings, let me first explain what Worldspawn is. Worldspawn is basically the geometry you create in your map. Brushes, terrain patches for example I created, let me just put the proper texture. I created like this, patch, simple terrain patch, like that. Now I won't get into how to edit those things, how to do these things, how to just elevate them, do stuff. There are way better tutorials than what I could produce about this. I will link some tutorial channels in the description, and I will add the Worldspawn settings site where I got them from in the description as well. I won't get into terrain patches. There are better tutorials than mine, like I said. I'm just showing you how they're created. Okay, so terrain patches, brushes, basically terrain and brush, those two type of entities are all Worldspawn, which means if we select this and press N, we see that it's under the class name Worldspawn. Select the reflection probe, it's a class name reflection probe. Those are entities. Anything other than Worldspawn should be considered entities. Of course, Worldspawn is an entity itself because it's the map itself, but yeah, in order to avoid confusion, we should consider these entities. Like if we press F, we disable entities, everything except the Worldspawn is gone. That's why I suggest that. So Worldspawn is your sky, your brushes, and your terrain patches. Basically sky is also a brush, so brushes and terrain patches in short. So yeah, I digress. Now your Worldspawn settings are basically the lighting of your map. I have here some really nice Worldspawn settings that are pretty they work really nice for daylight. So we just have to either assign those keys and values over here in the entity window while having, for example, a brush selected. Try not to assign models in the Worldspawn or anything inappropriate, because there may be serious problems. So yeah, we can either assign each key and value from this from these settings I have over here, but a much easier way to do that is the one I'll show you now. First of all, I will save and close Radiant. I will save our map and close Radiant. Then I will go to map source in our Call of Duty 4 directory, and then I will open our test map1 map file with text editor, and you can see this is our map. This is basically what we have created in translated in text, which is what Radiant reads to just display everything we see in the editor. So I have these settings here. I can just copy these settings and I can just place them here. Class name Worldspawn already exists, so it's here. Make sure when you do that you will not add any spare spaces, or that you will not have duplicates, that you will not just mess the syntax of these brackets, because your map will break and it will not be it can't be opened after that, because you will mess this up over here and Radiant cannot read it and it will be messed up, trust me. So basically your Worldspawn settings are right after the first curved bracket and right before the first brush, if you have made a brush. If you haven't made a brush, I'm not sure what's after that anyway. So yeah, just save this file, close it, yes, close those. Let's reopen Radiant to see how it will look. File, open our recent map. There we go, this is our map. Now, there's no lighting here because this is Radiant, okay? And we can do a lighting preview of the sunlight we just added, because Worldspawn settings are basically sunlight. If we go to View, Light Preview, Preview Sun as well, we have a very rough view of the lighting we have. We can see the light direction, for example. If I press N, select the brush, deselect it because the rendering is messed up when we select stuff. And we see the Worldspawn settings assigned to our Worldspawn entities, the brushes and patches mainly. There are lots of options here. I won't explain all of them. I will explain the most significant ones of them, the ones I understand better personally. So yeah, sun color is basically the color light that your sun will cast. I don't know much about this one. Sun direction is basically the direction of your sun, how high and how what's the rotation of the sun. For example, let's say we want the light to be, this should be the middle one, should be the one we can change. There you go. This should be the height of the sun. This should be the rotation of the sun around the map or something. So if we want it higher, we should go like this, I think. Yes, like that. We can change the angle again like that. Let's just keep it this way. Sunlight is the intensity of the sunlight. If we go to 2, it will look too bright. 1.5 is pretty good. 1 could be considered pretty low. 1.5 is fine. Color should be the ambient color, the color in areas where the light isn't really visible. Ambient is how dark or how bright the areas that light is not present. For example, the higher the ambient is, the closer to the lighting positions, to the lighting areas the shadows can be. For example, if it's 1, there's almost no difference. It's best to be low. It's best to be low, so there's good contrast with shadows. All those are very important. You can already see we have seen plenty of stuff so far. Let's just disable this. If you have a large map with lots of entities and you have view, light preview, preview sun as well enabled, you will get a lot of lag, so try not to have it enabled while you have a huge map open. Or at least just use cubic clipping. It will still lag, trust me. But yeah, it's best to keep it lagless. Okay, our map is finally ready to be compiled, at least on the BSP side. Just close this, close the folder. Let's open compile tools. As we see here, let's select our map and then deselect extra. Oh yeah, let's just go through this one. So this is our map list. This is what maps exist in map source. Of course, not every map file in the map source folder is ready to be compiled. Ours is. We won't go through the original maps, by the way. Just it's not necessary right now. By the way, we have the compile tab here. We have compile BSP. BSP compile is basically the map compile, which will later be compressed and added in the fast file, which is the playable file, which compiles the map and the script and any other assets that are necessary for our map to be played in one file, which is called fastfile.ff. It's the playable file of our map that we can share for others to play if we don't have any other modded assets, for example, textures. Now, this is what BSP does, basically. BSP is the map compile. It compiles the map in the BSP format for this to be later loaded in fastfile, like I said before. Now, the BSP options for our test compiles should be fast. Usually verbose and model shadow are suggested, but just fast works for me. If you want, you can just have these two selected. I'm not really sure what the rest of them do. Just don't click extra. It will take forever to compile the light. So BSP compile, the step 1 has three steps, three sub-steps, let's say like that. Compile BSP, which is the actual map compile, compile lightning, and connect paths. We don't have any paths in our map so far, so we don't have to check this. Compile light is necessary, compile BSP is necessary. Now, let's just click compile BSP and we will see a console window pop up, which will compile our map. And because our map is very small and has two little things, it took like a few seconds, couple seconds. There we can see compile BSP is over. When you see writing D, this file path, when you see writing and the file path of your map, this means that your compile BSP is successful. If your map doesn't update after some times, you will have to run back here and see why this doesn't compile, because there will be errors displayed here and why this is happening. This is important to debug your maps and find why each problem happens. These are really in-depth details that you need to know if you are actually going to do this. Compile light then just compiles the map's light, nothing to see here. There's usually no problems here. There could be errors here as well, so keep an eye out here in case you don't see anything in the BSP compile. And then we're done. We didn't have paths, so there's no path step. So we're done. Press any key. Let's just press any key. Let's compile reflections. You only need to compile reflections every time you edit the reflection entities. If you move them a little bit, it's best to do this again. If you keep them as they are, you don't have to press this again. If you never change the reflection probe ends, that's what I mean. Okay, and finally build fast file. We can't do this yet. Now, why can't we do this yet? Building fast file requires a code file for our map. There is no code file for our map. We have to generate it ourselves. So, to create a code file for our map, we just have to create a text file. Let's just do it in desktop for now. Let's create a text file over here. Name it exactly as our map's name. In our case, is no, not with caps. Test map 1. And then you will have to change the extension of the file. Just delete the txt. .gsc. Yes, edit the format. Now, if you don't have the file extension, the view file extension enabled in your Windows, you will need it, trust me. So, we just created a GSC file, which is basically a text file. I use Programmer's Notepad, pretty useful tool. And these files are basically game script files for Call of Duty. We can just open the file, and then I will just write the code necessary for Call of Duty maps to just run, for single player of course. You just need one function, main. It's a lot like C++ if you know programming. If you don't know programming, don't even bother with Call of Duty, trust me. So, main, one function, then I just call this function maps load main. This is all the code you need for a single player map to just run. This is all we need. This is the most basic code we need. So having this file here, we just cut this file and go to our Call of Duty 4 directory. And now I will show you the folder where our scripts are located. It's in Call of Duty 4 raw maps. This is where our single player code scripts should go. I will paste our file over here, and there is our map code. This is all we need. We will make a shortcut of this folder. It will be necessary. There we go. And now we are ready to build fast file. However, there will be a necessary step with the update zone file. I'll explain that as we go. So let's just click build fast file. So as we can see, it says there are no zone files for test map 1. Would you like to create them? That's a very useful thing they did here. We just click yes. Build fast file is starting. It will show this error, which is nothing important. A localizedstrings test map 1 str is missing. This is because we didn't create one. We created just a GSC file because that was necessary. This one isn't really necessary. This one is for text information, like if you want a custom text strings in your map, just We will go to that later, like I said. Okay, we don't need this for now. It's nothing game breaking. It will not affect the map at all. It's just there to let us know that it's missing. So, link or press save, press any key to continue. Let's just press any key to continue. Okay, now we're ready to test our map. Make sure to have developer enabled always. Cheats are very useful for testing your map. Trust me, you will need them. Now let's just try to see if our map actually runs properly or if there are any steps needed. It should work, but let's see. Okay, I expected that. Now, this is really useful because we can learn how to update our zone file properly. Now, this happens because I added Price as an NPC. And Price as an NPC has a weapon with a grenade launcher. The grenade launcher weapons have a sub-weapon for the actual grenade launcher, and that needs to be loaded separately because for some reason the models can't do it themselves. Now, whenever we have an error which says missing asset X, for example, we can just close the game, but when we have an enable developer on, and if we go to update zone file, this missing asset will appear here, because update zone file allows you to edit your zone. What is zone file, first of all? I should explain that. Zone file is basically a CSV file which tells the fast file what files it will pack in it, because fast files, like I said, are the playable files of the map itself. Fast files include, as you can see here, the BSP part of your map, which is the 3D design and the entities, the GSC file of your map, which is your code, and other various stuff we don't really need to get into right now. Like, for example, here we have sounds which are automatically loaded and stuff. We don't really need to get into this. So, our map, so now our map is missing the sub weapon for the grenade launcher of Price. And every time we have developer on, we run our map and there is a missing asset error, the update zone file will appear any missing asset in the left column, and we just have to copy it from here and paste it in the right column and click save. Sometimes save is not visible, so you can just resize the window in case it doesn't appear. Just click save, successfully updated, okay, rebuild fast file to apply the changes. We see this is not important, like I said before. Close that and then just run our map again. And now, if everything is correct, okay, we need MP5 as well. Okay, let's just copy MP5, paste MP5, save, build fast file, and which makes me remember that we also need our view hands model, because if we run our map now, our view model will be non-existent. So to load our view hand model, the default view hand model that is assigned to the player when playing a random test map is model Viewmodel base view hands, if I remember correctly. Let's see if I type that right. I'm not sure if it's the right name. It should be right. Okay, let's go. It should work properly now, I hope. There we go. Like I explained, the grenade launcher is there, our weapons are here, our hands are here. We have a basic map to play as, like I explained every step of the way. So, we just have Price. Of course, his name is not the proper one. His name is just a random name. Names for story characters are assigned either in code or in Radiant. I'll show you how to do that. It's very simple, it's very basic. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna see before we go to NPCs is going to be triggers and objectives. They're gonna be simple, but they are pretty important to understand in their full extent. So, first of all, let's see what triggers are and how they work. Now, if we press right click on the 2D grid, we have the menu we were talking about, and we have trigger. Under trigger we have many options. The most frequent and most important ones you need to use are multiple and use touch, either of those. Now let's spawn a multiple trigger. This is a trigger brush which is not a Worldspawn brush. It is an entity, a trigger entity. So it's not assigned to the Worldspawn. So you shouldn't confuse the Worldspawn settings, like we said before, and the trigger, which is under class name trigger multiple. Now let's also spawn a trigger use touch. Now, what's the difference? As you can see, they're also in different colors in the 2D grid. Now, what are their difference? It's very simple. Trigger multiple, this is the trigger multiple, waits is only activated actually whenever player or other ends go through it. By default, it only waits for player, but if we press N for the entity window, we can see that there are options here: AI access, AI allies, AI neutral, not player, vehicle, trigger spawn. These are options we really need to have in mind. Just ignore the difficulty ones. Now, what these options do: by default, this trigger is only activated, is only enabled whenever you as player go through it. By default, if we click not player, if we check this box, then it will not wait for anyone. Like, it will never be activated unless we do it through script, which there's a way. Now, if we click AI access, it will be activated whenever an AI from the team access goes through it. AI allies from AI allies, if they're both clicked, checked or whatever, either access or allies will enable it. AI neutral is for civilian. We don't really use civilians in this game, so yeah, you get the point, I guess. Vehicle, I think it's the same thing with AI. If a vehicle goes through it, it gets enabled. Trigger spawn is a special one. Do not click this if you don't use it as a spawn. We will explain to that when we go to the spawner and the NPC part. It's too early for that now. So that's mostly all of. Oh, touch once is to be activated only once. It's not really necessary. It's for special occasions only. We don't really use that if it's not necessary. Okay, that's what trigger multiple does. Trigger use, I have never pressed that, so it's not really necessary in this case. Trigger use touch is basically the press F trigger. Whenever these trigger use touch or trigger use exist, it's a press F trigger. And by default, they don't have a text displayed like press F to do this. You have to assign this manually, and I'll show you how to do it in a bit. Now, first things first, we need to see our map's script. Now, we will need, if we are going to code objectives in our... actually, let's make the layout of the map first. Just a very simple objective like I did in my old tutorials. So let's take a wall texture, just design a very basic play here. Exterior wall, that should be enough. That little wall over here, pretty simple. Also, before I go anywhere, let me just do this, a tall wall. Now, let's add a barrier, an invisible barrier around the map so the player or NPCs can't fall off. Textures, UJudge tool. Invisible barriers, invisible walls that we meet in video games are, in Call of Duty 4 at least, they are clip. Clip is the invisible wall. Mon or whatever it is clip for AI only. I think it stands for monster or something. Clip full. Actually, there is a site that explains all the types of the tool textures. I'll see if I can find a link for the description. So yeah, basically clip is for player. Clip player is only for, clip is for player and NPCs as well. Clip player is just for player. Clip mon is for AI only. Clip metal makes metal sound when you walk on it. It's a collision barrier anyway. Clip no side for wood. Clip no side dirt for dirt, and you get the point. Those are most of them are self-explanatory, but you get the point. So just a normal clip is what we'll use in this case. So I'll just basically draw this wall over here. Just stretch it up and go upwards. Oh, what did I do? No, just ignore that. I'll just stretch it to the edges of the map like that. I will copy it, and now you would do this to stretch it, but no. we can just rotate this by pressing this button. This button will rotate it from the top down view towards like that, instead of having to resize it and replace it. We can just rotate it like that. Press it here, pretty good. Stretch it down here so it's not out of the map. Now select both of them, Control C, Control V, or space, whatever you like. Rotate twice, and then we have to just match them to close the map itself. Let's see if the other corner matches as well. Not quite. Yeah, like that is fine. Let's see over here. It's fine, it's great. So we have our map sealed off. Player can't go outside, can't fall underneath it, unless we make a hole in the middle. So yeah, we have this wall, we have those crates over here. I'll just keep those crates here for now. By the way, I didn't mention something about models before. Models, if you just spawn misc model you see here, they will not have collision, they will not have clip. So like I said, we have to either manually dress them with clip, which is pretty painful to do for every single model. That's why prefabs exist. What prefabs are basically map files just placed in the map itself, like parts of the map being a map file, a separate map file. So if we were to add a prefab, let's just create a prefab. Let's just save the map file, new. Let's just misc model com create one. Just put it in the center. It's important to put it in the center of the map. 0, 0, 0 coordinates. Now I will just dress it from all sides with clip. I just do it a little bit more accurate, being a perfectionist. The height should be fine like that. What about the width? The width should be fine like that. Okay. Now I'll save it as, let's go to prefabs and save it in the folder prefab. Let's say test crate. Okay, we have test crate saved. This is a map file with just one model of a crate and a clip around it saved as test crate. If we go back to our map, we can just spawn this crate like that. Prefabbing is very important for you to understand. It will save your life from a lot of headaches. So we're at the prefabs folder. We can see test crate over here. Prefab folder is under map source, which is under Call of Duty folder. You get the point. Test crate, we can just open that and we have a prefab of the model over here. So we won't have to dress every single crate with every angle, like rotate the brushes. Rotating brushes is a pain in the butt, trust me. So we just have it ready over here to place like that. Most of the misc models of the game are already in the prefab folder. Let me show you. Prefabs folder has a misc models folder, which has most of the game models already with collision. Oh, what did I do? Oh, that model, for example. Why is this like that? I don't know, but doesn't matter. And an easy way to do this, if the model you just place as misc model has a collision. Oh, we're already in the misc models folder. We shouldn't be here. Sometimes when you switch from misc prefab and misc model, they will conflict the folders. So if you press, like I press now, misc model, it has the prefab. You shouldn't be here, so we should be backwards, Call of Duty 4, back to raw, X model. Yeah, this is a little painful, so yeah, you have to go through it sometimes. Let's say this model this time, something different. So I have this misc model and I forgot to make it a prefab, to add the prefab version of it with a collision. That's what I mean. So in order to do this easily without having to click misc prefab and just browse to find this model, you can just press N, and if this model has a prefab made for it with collision, you can just click to the class name and change misc model to misc prefab very carefully, because changing class name is dangerous for errors. If it works, okay, apparently this model has no prefab. That was a bad example on my end. I apologize. So let's try another one. Let's just try the crate we used before. We already made our own prefab for it, but let's see if the method I showed you works. So press N, misc model, and instead of misc model, misc prefab. There we go. Like I said, this model is now the corresponding misc prefab version of it in your map source / prefabs / misc models folder. That's all of it. It's an easy way in case you forget to add your misc models with collision instead of making them from scratch. So I want to compare what differences they have. Not much, as I can see. Anyway, we digress a lot. That was really important to show. And now we can go back to the trigger and map placement. So I can just delete these. Apart from these two, we need these. Oh, by the way, this is a misc model without a model assigned. If you keep those in your map, your compiler will crash and say that there is a misc model without a model assigned, and you have to recompile the map from scratch. This is very costly when your map is huge. Like if you have a huge map and you waited like 30 minutes for it to compile, and then you have forgotten this model here without a model assigned, then it's a pain in the butt. It's a waste of time. So make sure never to have misc prefabs or misc models without anything assigned in them. It's gonna cost you time. Okay, so let's start placing our triggers. We have a trigger multiple here, for which we will wait the player to go through, and that will tell you how to find objects in the code using that. Okay, let's make a little story. We'll make a fully functional single player map together in this tutorial. It's going to be a large tutorial, by the way. I'll try to cover as much as I can, as best as I can, you know. Let's see, what else do we have here? We can just make a quick wall over here, another quick wall. I have a good idea of what to do. Okay, that's cool. I'll rotate these like that. Yes. Oh, no, not this one. This one. I'll place these over here like that. Our cover will be here, enemy cover. It's good as it is. Okay, another trigger here, maybe even here. Yeah, I'll explain what I do in a minute. So let's put this crate over here. Both of these crates actually. Now that we have both of them, our prefab and the original one. So we have two crates. Of course, you can, if you are annoyed by the collision, you can just disable clip over here and you just have the normal view of the models. Okay, I'll put this here now. Let me just see if the sky is alright. I'll disable the sky because I think I accidentally selected it, like I warned you before. It's always good to have it. And yeah, I didn't do this. I never did this. So yeah, as you can see, for me it's pretty casual, pretty easy, pretty fast to produce. Anyway, you just need a lot of practice, that's all. So now what we're gonna do, let me just sum up the plan that I have here. First of all, we're gonna check the objective part. We're gonna spawn the player, give the player some weapons of our choice, then wait until he goes through this trigger, and then make an objective where we should take some sort of object from those crates. Taking this object, we will show you how to hide the object, how to handle scripted models, and then I will show you how to open a small door. Actually, I should do that. I should show you how Brushmodels work long before we go to AI. Now, to create a door, doors can either be models or brush models. What brush models are? They are scripted brushes which aren't part of the Worldspawn, like I explained. Now I'll make a small doorway over here like that. Let's say, let's make the upper part as well. Okay, it's a little bit too wide. Okay, now I'll just put this trigger on the side. Now let's go to textures, usage, and door. There we see all the door textures. Let's just use this one for now. Everything is gray though. Let's just use something colorful. I'll just create the door like that over here. You can see it's deformed. I will show you how to not make it deformed like that. You see how I align it to the grid, how I make it thinner compared to the wall. Now I'm gonna stretch it up and down, and now we have a door here. Now to make the door texture be properly, there are many ways to move textures and stuff, but in this case we will need to press S. S is the surface inspector, which helps us assign textures in various ways, stretch textures, change the texture. It's basically UV mapping for the geometry of your map. UV mapping is hard in actual 3D modeling, and Radiant makes it easier because it's just map design, it's not really modeling. So yeah, what we need here is just press fit, just to make the door fit the scaling. And there we go, the door is properly placed, but if we press fit we also see the edges of it being stretched. So what we have to do is just select the whole door, and like I showed earlier, deselect the faces by holding Ctrl and Shift, and then the rest of the faces should be some sort of wooden texture, which we can find surface type wood. Also use edge all, not just doors. Let's say this one. Whoa, where did I go? So now it's somewhat better. Escape to deselect everything, and you can see if I move the door that it's better on the sides. Okay, undo to press it back. Now textures, surface type all, so we won't limit our view to the wood. Then we want to press U so we can view only the used textures in the map. Anyway, so with that out of the way, we are slowly progressing with the map design. We will create, we want to spawn a script model here, and we have the script brush model here. We will create the door as a script brush model. It's not a script brush model yet, just to clarify. So let's just create a script model, just like MISC model, only in the part of the script, and then we go to model. There we go. We minimize this, and then we are in the Xmodel folder, raw/Xmodel folder. Let's go to clipboard, paper, and paper obj. We will need both of them. Click paper. Now I will clone this, I will copy paste this, and then I will press N to change the assigned model instead of reopening the window where I browse the models, because we now know the model, which is _obj, which stands for objective. This will be invisible in the editor, but we will be able to see it in the 2D view. So we just overlap these two for some reason. I'll explain why later. We rotate them, having them both selected. If you want to see if they're both selected and if the second one is there, you can just right click and you can see what entities you see in the right click position. Anyway, we just move both of them here. There will be some kind of documents we have to acquire. I'll just try to align them like that, just enough so they won't overlap. So let's see, we have two models here, two scripted models that we have to give a name. Now it's time to introduce you to the target name key and value, which is an extremely important thing you have to remember. So if you want to note anything down, that's something you should note down. So scripted objects, models, triggers, NPCs and stuff can be defined in the script using the target name key and value. Now target name is basically a name which we can use to detect, to define stuff in our code. It's very important. So this way we can tell the code, this trigger, wait for this trigger, specific trigger with this target name until player goes through it, then wait for this trigger and do that to this door, like hide the door, show the door. We will see these functions when we go to the script finally. So first things first, let's start assigning the target names. I will assign a target name to our friend here, like that. Target name price. Very simple target name. Keep them simple. So yeah, we won't do much with the AI in this part. I will just show you how to assign the target name. There's no point on assigning target name to player. Player can already be defined in script in a way I will show you later. Now, the trigger is what we will use. So, we have the trigger here. We can press target name. Let's say trig1. That's how I like to name triggers whenever they don't have a general purpose. So now we have this trigger with target name trigger1. This trigger from now on is trigger1, trig1. So we can refer to that in script later. Now this will be trigger documents or docs, trig docs, because there's a different use for that. And this trigger will be trig door. Okay, so having target names set in our triggers, let's start setting target names to our objects. Let me just hide this trigger so we can easily select the model. I'll press H to hide. H for hide, makes sense, I guess. Now, there are three things here. One of them should be the box, one of them should be the objective, the glowing. Oh, by the way, the objective clipboard is the glowing model in the game. There are only specific glowing models for the game. By the way, you can't use glowing model for everything. Anyway, and the rest two are the clipboards. Now we have selected the normal clipboard, which is a script model. Therefore, we can assign target name docs, just docs, target name docs. I deselect by an escape, then I will try to select the second one. There we go, this is the second one. We can see it on the 2D grid, which is highlighted, while the normal one is not highlighted. So this is docs obj, like that. By the way, you cannot define misc models and misc prefabs with target name. It will not work. And never ever ever assign target name in the Worldspawn. It's a big mistake. So now we have both of these defined. Oh, to unhide the trigger, hold Shift and H and it will unhide every object or entity that you have hidden by pressing H. So for example, if I had, for example, all these walls, you think they are deleted, but they're just hidden from you. So you can edit stuff out of them. Hold Shift and H to unhide them and they're back where they were. All that in long detail. So we have the door trigger, and now this is very important. I will show you what brush models are. Like I said, those are trigger U's, which require you to press F for them to be activated. So the event is will proceed. So let's hide this trigger, and we have this door here now. Now, to create a script brush model, we can just have a brush, one brush selected, or more than one brush selected, but this time we will have one brush for this example. We can right click and script brush model. Now I will not click this. I actually will click this. Okay, I will explain why I said that. So we have a script brush model here, which is this door. So in the script, I'll unhide the trigger. So in the script, let's just say we define this door. I won't define this door yet. Let's just say we have defined this door with a target name. We find it in the script. We tell the trigger to press F, open the door and stuff. All the code necessary I will explain when we get there. But this door will, let's say we tell it to rotate. It will rotate from the default rotation center, which is not what we want. I pressed Ctrl Z, by the way, to undo. So how can we define a rotation origin for a script brush model? We can set a custom origin for a script brush model. This is done by going to textures, use tools, and you see this origin texture, this origin tool actually over here. We can just draw this texture over here. I'll press use. Only use visible textures anyway. Now we want to make this origin be the center of rotation of this door, this center of origin anyway. each brush model you create should have only one origin brush, and no origin brushes should be alone without being assigned to a script brush model. Now, we already created this door as a brush model, so we need to unbrush model this door. We basically do this by selecting it, right click, ungroup entity. Now it's back to being a normal structural brush in the Worldspawn. Now it's just Worldspawn, you can see. Now I'll place this origin where it should be before we bind them together. So the door should rotate like this. I'll just move the rotation origin here in the editor. Should open like this, okay? Now, having them both selected while being both Worldspawn, not assigned to any brush model, having them both selected and pressing right click script brush model will make them both the same brush model with two parts, two brushes. But it's the same object, the same brush model. Now, it's best that you keep it that way, keep it simple. For now, don't try to do complex compositions with script brush models. We can individually move them, but it's suggested to just do only edits that are necessary. Now, if we define this door, I will select both of them. And if you have many parts of the brush models, for example, you have 6 brushes and 1 origin brush, I don't know why. I mean, if you have too many parts and you can't individually select them, you can just hold Alt and Shift and then select one of the brush models, and it will automatically select all parts of that same brush model. They may appear as 2 different brush models, but they're the same brush model. Now, selecting them both, like I said, pressing N and target name target name door 1. There we go. Door 1. Now this door is going to have path nodes in front and behind it. Now by pressing N and pressing dynamic path will be necessary for us to connect the paths in script later. So that's all for now, and let's just name this last trigger. What's this trigger? Trigger 1. This is trigger 2. Trig 2. There we go. Okay, so now we have a very basic play for a very basic objective. I explained too many details. I went into a lot of depth. It is necessary if you wish to understand this better. I guess we have everything defined. Okay, like I said, the brush model is very important. You can have a brush model without an origin, but the rotation and the movement of it won't be as accurate as you want. So yeah, it's best suggested to create an origin brush with your brush model, bind them together, and yeah, try to follow my steps as I display them here. Okay, our map is ready to compile. For the objective part, we can just click compile BSP, wait for it to finish. It won't take too long. There we go. We don't have any path nodes, so we're good. We won't need to compile reflection probes. Just build fast file, and it's ready. Won't need this yet. We will go to it in a moment. And there we go. We have him defined, but we didn't change his name yet. We have the triggers and everything, but nothing will happen. Nothing happens at all, because we have no script for it. The objects are there, the triggers are here. You can see them both, even the glow and the non-glow model are both here. It's not hidden or everything or anything. And yeah, the clip is here, the invisible wall. There was a small lag over there. Anyway, so yeah, we don't have a code for all this, so let's just go and code everything. Now, this is our code. Anything we do should be after maps load main, and it's best to create our own functions for the things we do. So first of all, I will define our NPC. Actually, I will call a function. I will try to show you how functions work. So to create a new function, you just name the function in an appropriate name that the code can read. Let's say setup NPC setup ally, actually, that's better. This is as an empty function. To call this function, you can just call the name of the function here, brackets, and these things over here. So this is basically calling the function. Whenever the code starts, it goes here, it calls this function. Now, by putting the word thread behind the calling of a function, which calling a function means just do the things that are in the function. So by putting the word thread before calling a function, the script will not wait. This function, for example, will not wait for this function to finish before moving to the next one or whatever we have after this. So yeah, this is usually very useful for sequences with complex waits and events and stuff like that. Now, let me just copy paste this and make setup sequence. Let me just put it above. Setup sequence. We will write stuff in them in a moment. I'm just creating empty functions to organize our script beforehand. That's all I'm doing right now. Handling the spacing a little bit. So, let me just do this C++. The highlight we need is C++. We'll need it later. So, setup sequence. In the sequence, we will need our triggers defined. So, this is the most important part we will use here. The most commonly used function ever, which is a built-in function in the game. We will not need to include anything. So, to define something, anything, let's say our triggers, we just have to call the function getEnt, but we have nothing before it or after it, so it won't work this way. GetEnt returns the entity that it finds with the given target name in the parameters as an object inside the script. Now, if this makes no sense to you, you need a lot of practice with programming. So yeah, first of all, I will just show you how it's done in case this is too much for you. I will put two parameters. The first one will be the target name we gave in the editor, which is trig1, and the second one is target name, just target name. And then we have to put equal behind in the start, and then we will have to write an object name. This object name is the way we will refer to this trigger inside this function. Let's say trig1, just, no, without space. Trig1, just like the target name, doesn't really matter. So, what I just did here, I just created an object inside our function which refers to the trigger inside our editor. So we basically can tell the trigger to do stuff. For example, trigger wait until the player goes through it, which is exactly this. Trig1 space wait till, which is a wait function in the game. Trigger multiple will, when you call wait till trigger on trigger multiple, it basically waits until player goes through it. So that's all we need to have. So there we go with this one. What else do we need? We need the trigger documents. Let me just go back in the editor, select this, press N, trig docs, just to remember the name. Go back here, copy this. Actually, we can define them all at once. It's usually a good idea. Trig docs. Was it docs or doc? Let me just see again. Docs. There we go. It's best to. There we go. Just by placing a new name in the parameter of target name, the first parameter, I mean, you can just define a new object, a new scriptable object, or whatever you're gonna call it. Okay, so you know what? Let's just define things and then do stuff afterwards. So trigger docs. Then we have trigger docs. Again, wait till trigger, and this is a trigger docs is a trigger use, which waits for player to press F. So we will need a hint string, which will indicate, which will tell player to press F to do this thing. So it's about time we make a localized string file for our map, which is the one we saw error in the fast file. To do that, we go back in our Call of Duty 4 folder in raw. In English, pay attention here, raw English, localized strings, and then we create another text file called the same name with our map, which is test map1. Then remove the txt and place str. There we go. Yes, and open it in our text editor. There we go. It's just a blank file. We can take reference from the official files over here. For example, the debug file. All of those won't really make sense to you, but I can just copy the essential stuff we need and just remove everything else. So what these files do, let's go through this. So this first part, you don't really need to mess with it. Just keep it as it is. And this is necessary only at the end marker. It always has to be there, or else there will be errors. So to define a text line in your localizedstrings file of your map, you need two lines, reference and the name of your choice, and then lang English, and between brackets the text you want. So whenever you refer to this name over here in your code, this line is accepted, like it's linked to your code. So let's say here trig take doc, trigger take documents. So what we need is just write press. So this ++1, this actually end one character is by default referring to the action key, so it works pretty well to have that over here. So this is basically translated to the binded action key of our player. So we can just keep it here. Press F, for example, in my case, to grab the documents dot. Let's just make capital documents to emphasize the object we're taking. Also, Call of Duty has a cool system with colors, so we can just colorize text by pressing a special character and a number behind it. Press this and 3. This indicates that any text after this character will be yellow, so F will be yellow, but we don't want this to be yellow, so we'll have to make it this, which is white, so anything after this will be white. So this is basically press F to grab documents, with F being yellow and everything else white. So there we go, we have our first text defined, and we really did do a lot in this, because this is quite a lot to explain. I'm just messing with the spacing. I will also create an objective, obj1, make a new text, grab the documents. This is the first objective. Second objective will be push through the enemy lines, for example, just a random objective. Okay, those two are enough for now. Oh, also we will need some intro screen lines. We will see about them later. Let's say intro 1, more brackets test map 1. This will be the intro lines, you know, the introduction we have in Call of Duty with the green letters. Let's say player 1, intro 3, location, just location, and then let's say SAS, the team, intro 4. Don't try not to have duplicates, it will not work. Okay, this is all we need for now to create our objectives, to create our trigger. Oh, we also need open door. Trig open door. The same thing, just to open door. There we go. Okay, this should be enough. These are our text lines that we need for our test map. And now let's go back to our script and see how we can use them. Now, first of all, we need to assign the text for the trigger to have the text displayed. To do this, we can just put the name of the trigger to refer to this trigger object. Then we will have to put this function, set hint string. Now, set hint string is the function, and then we need to put the text from our localized string file in the parameters. But there's a special way we need to do this. Whenever we refer to localized string lines, for example, obj1, trigger and stuff, we will have this character beforehand, two brackets, and then the name of the reference from the line we want to use. In our case, take documents. I just copy the reference name, which refers to this text, and paste it here. But believe it or not, we're still not done. We need to put before the reference name the name of the str file itself. I hope it's not too confusing to you guys, because we're going in a lot of depth right now. But just try to keep track of the things I'm doing, and hopefully they'll make sense at the end. So, like I said, we put the name of the reference over here, and then we have to put the file name beforehand. This will be test map1 and underscore to separate from the reference name itself. So we have test map1, which is the file of the str file, including the reference line, and then the reference name we assigned to the line. This is how we tell our GSC code how to look at str text lines. Hope it makes sense. So now, by doing this, our trigger has this text on it. So whenever we go close to the trigger, the text we have over here will appear, indicating player to press F to grab the documents. Now if you press F, nothing will happen. So let's just make something happen. We can either copy paste this to put nothing, so we can make the text disappear whenever player presses F, or we can just disable the trigger by calling this function, trigger off, which disables the trigger entirely, and as a result this line will not be visible. So let's go and test what we did, because enough talking, enough coding. Let's just see if the things we did have any effect to what we did. By the way, notice how our script flow is. We have the start of our map flow sequence. We wait for trigger 1 before we define the documents trigger and assign this. So before we go through trigger 1, which is this one over here, before we go through this trigger, this documents trigger will not have any text defined to it, any text displayed. So when we go through this trigger, that's when the text appears, and that's when the code waits for us to press F. So if we like no clip around this trigger and go here, there will be no text. Just to give you a small example of how the script flow works, how your code flow works. Okay, I believe we have build fast file. Let's just go and test this. Okay, I know what this happened. Okay, so this error we just had can be solved by just including these files above our code, which are basically other scripts from the game, from the mod tools that are necessary for some of the functions. It's nothing, it's just a copy paste. You just have to paste these lines. It's nothing to worry about. So now if we recompile fast file to update the script changes we made, just to run them up, it should work properly. Unless we have, okay, there we go. So like I said, let's just try it out. No clip. I'll go around the trigger over here, and there is no press F, nothing. If I go through this trigger, if I just touch it, then this trigger will be enabled, as you can see. There we go. Like I promised, the text is there, the F bind of our player is there. Now if we press F, the text will disappear, but those will not disappear, and I will show you how to make these disappear in a moment. Press F and the text is gone, just like I promised. Now, going out of the game, let's define the document models. Let's go here in the editor, hide this, select these, let me just remember the names. Okay, it's docs. I'll define them in the start, because whenever you do something to objects in your code, you have to have them defined with getEnt beforehand. So let's go do docs, which is the simple docs, and then docs obj. There we go. Okay, so let's say that after we go through trigger 1, we want docs obj to appear itself, to indicate that player has to go there and press F. So before that we need to hide the object, apparently. So at the start of our code we'll just call hide, just hide. just the function hide, which is a built-in function in the game, to the object that we defined before. Hide makes script brush models and scripted models just be invisible. That's all it does. And then when we pass through trigger 1, we just do show, which is the opposite of hide, apparently. So there we go, we have that. And when we press F with a trigger, we want both of these to hide or get deleted, because we don't have any use of them anymore. So the objects will be entirely deleted from the map. For the gameplay part, of course, not in the editor. So we can just call delete both of the objects like that. Let's just go and test this. We defined both of the document versions, the objective glowing one and the regular one. We hide the objective one before we hit the first trigger. We show it when we hit the first trigger and enable the trigger. Then we wait until player presses F. And then we delete both of them. And all this is gonna work pretty easily and smoothly. These are very basic steps, like let's just do no clip. I don't have my keybinds on. You can see it's just the regular one. Then if we go through the first trigger, which is right here, we can see the glowing one appeared, like I said. And then when we press F, both of them disappear, just like that. Very easy, very simple, very basic. Pretty good so far. So before we move to the door, I want to set up the objectives. So to add objectives, we need to call this function objective add, and then we need to add 4 parameters. The first parameter is the objective number. Objective 1 will have the number 1 in the first parameter, objective 2 the number 2, and so on. The second parameter is the objective state. All we need to know for now is that we just need to put active here. Don't worry about the other states that we can add. Just put active and you're set. The third parameter is the text that the objective will have. We can just copy this and change it to obj1, because as we said before, test map1 is the file name of the localizedstrings file, and obj1 is the reference of the text we want to use in this file. Hope that makes sense again. And the last parameter, the fourth one, is the position that we want the objective to appear on the minimap to indicate where the player should go. So the position can be either be 2 brackets and an XYZ position, which is 0, 0, 0, which is nowhere, like in the 0 position of the map, which won't really work. So we want the position in our case to be, let's say, the position of one of our, let's say, docs, the position of the script object docs. But by placing docs here, this won't do anything. So we have to refer to the object docs and go to the sub object of this object, which is origin. By default, when we define stuff with getEnd, especially script models, they have a sub object of origin, angles, and other values. So basically, docs origin is the position of the docs file, of the document file, the object, the script model we have in our map. So the objective will be displayed in this position. And that's all there is to it. As simple as that. And now, when we press F to take the document, we want this objective to be completed in the screen. To do that, we just have to call the other function called objective state, then the number of the objective, which is 1, referring to this objective, and comma, the state will be it's done. There we go. Objective state 1 done. And let's go see if our objectives work. It's pretty simple so far, trust me. Even though if I make it sound too complicated, it's not. It's very simple. It's baby steps so far. There we go. Right when we spawn, we have grab the documents objective. It's not active for some reason. We will check it out really soon. We go through the trigger. This appears. We press F. Objective completed. There we go. So yeah, why is it not active? We just have to make objective current one. I forgot to add this. Right after we define the objective, right after we set the objective actually, we have to call objective current and the objective ID, the number 1 in this case. This is what I forgot. Let's just see if this works for now. Pretty simple so far. And yes, it is active, just as I promised in the menu. Go through the trigger, disappears, and pressing F. There we go, objective completed. That's all there is to it. Pretty good so far. So now we want to do this intro screen text that we saw in many Call of Duty maps. Now, to do this, it's a little bit more complex, so I will create a new function for this. Set up intro screen. So basically, to do intro screen, we have to use this code that I copied from an official level. Just create a new function here, like that. So yeah, it's a little bit complex so far. I will not explain what all these do. I'll just show you how the function is. So yeah, you can just take this function and call it in your code and just replace the file name and the intro line of your choice. So yeah, this is the proper line for this code. We just build fast file again. Did I save this? Yes, I did. Run map. And there we go. You can see the text on the bottom. You can add a delay, like let's say wait 3 and then display the text or something like that. We'll see. Let's see. There we go. It appears after 3 seconds. Or we can even call this function after we hit this trigger to make things more interesting. Put it here. So whenever we go through this trigger, this function will be called, and the rest of the stuff, of course. And these lines will appear. I can just remove the delay we had over there. I can just put it lower just to make more sense. You know. Okay, so basically we are done with this part. We can start using the door now. We can start the door part over here in the sequence function. We have to define the door. Let's just define the door over here, which is door 1 if I remember correctly. Let me just confirm that. Select the door and door 1 exactly. And this is door, trig door. Okay. I'll just copy paste the trigger doc over here. Trig doc, trig door, and replace the object name instead of rewriting everything. And this was open door. Simple as that. We have the door defined here. And now when we press F to open the door, let's just copy this. We don't need this defined beforehand. We need this here. Door 1 should rotate. Now, how is rotation working? There are a couple ways to rotate and move objects. I will just list you the functions over here. Move X is moving an object to the X-axis. The first parameter is amount, like how many units. The second one is time. Fourth parameter is acceleration time. Third parameter actually, and fourth one is the acceleration time. So of course the total amount of acceleration, the acceleration time should not be more than the time, and you can just skip these two entirely and just use time to have a smooth open or moving. So it's move X, move Y, and move Z. We also have rotate roll, which works the same way, only instead of units you rotate to angles. 360 is a full turn, you should know that. Same with the deceleration and acceleration, those apply here as well. Rotate roll, rotate yaw, which is what we'll use, and rotate pitch. Those are the rotation and the move functions you need to know. I will comment those over here just in case we need them later. There we go. And there are also two more functions which are called rotate to and then move to. Those move to a specific position instead on a fixed axis, like they rotate to a fixed position, to a fixed rotation, and move to rotate moves it to a fixed position. Anyway, you get the point. But the parameters here, the time and acceleration, the acceleration still apply, but the first one, it is a vector, at least for the move to. It's a vector. What a vector is are three values, x, y, and z. So you have a parenthesis, or actually, yeah, you have parentheses, for example, 12x, 12y, 6z. This is a vector, a position on the map, on the position 12 on the x-axis, 12 on the y-axis, 6 on the z-axis. Now, this vector is usually in objects, it's translated this way. So docs.origin is pointing to the xyz position of the docs object in the map. So you can just use another object's position instead to move it. The same thing applies to angles. Let me just put time next to it so you know it's there. Okay, the same thing happens to angles here. Angles are three values again. Instead of angles, we can have the pitch, roll, and yaw, or pitch, yaw, roll. I'm not sure of their order. So 0, 0, 0 is no rotation. 0, 180. 0 is a direct turn on the top-down view, and stuff like that. So yeah, this is rotate to. This is really good to be used to rotate something to another object. Angles. These are very useful to know. Very useful move functions. This is how you move scripted objects inside the game. You will not be able to do this with NPCs. There are other ways to do that. But anyway, this is out of our lead. So for our tutorial, for our door, we have, let's see in the top-down view over here, we have our top-down view of the map, of the door here. So the rotation we will use is yaw, because yaw rotates in this axis. Only we have the center of rotation in the origin. So we want to rotate towards this side, which is, it's plus rotate yaw, not minus rotate yaw anyway. So let's just demonstrate that in the code. We have to call the function rotate yaw, and we will go plus, not 180, it's too much. Let's go 160. Time, let's do it in 2 seconds. Acceleration time, let's make 1 and 1, exactly to the limit to make it smooth enough. And now, if we had path nodes, we would also need to call this function to connect the paths. Connect paths, so our NPCs can walk through the door, because if we don't do this, the path nodes will not connect. We'll keep this here because it's necessary for later. It won't really do something. So let's see if this works actually. Don't need to compile the map because we have everything we need. We can just compile the code to the fast file and see if it works. Okay, like I said, we have the objective. When we go through the trigger, our Introscreen appears. Press F, everything disappears, objective completed. Then we go to the door, and the door opens when we press F. The movement works. Now, you will need a lot of experimentation to get the movements and the rotations properly if you want them more accurately. So next part we will learn how to spawn and how to handle NPCs, how to define them in the script, what spawners are, what NPCs are, what AI are. Now here we have this price spawner over here. As we saw in the previous parts, Price existed, he was spawned, he was pre-spawned in the game. That's because we didn't have this checkbox checked. Now I did check it, which means that if we compile the map and run it, he won't be there. He will have to be spawned from a trigger or from code. Now, never ever ever place a trigger below player and assign an NPC to spawn. This will cause some problems you don't want to have. So never do that. Never put a trigger around player. Just call events in script or have the triggers in distance from the player spawn. It's very important. Now, what spawners are and how NPCs are spawned. Like I said, from triggers or from code is the only way we can spawn NPCs, which is of course the most valid way. So spawner is the position from where an NPC will spawn. Makes sense, right? So one spawner has the ability to spawn more than one NPC. However, in most cases we just use multiple spawners and spawn all the NPCs from their spawner separately. For example, let's say we have this team over here of prices, and then we spawn them all at once. They all have the same target name, and we just either from trigger or from code we tell them to spawn, and these spawners will generate one NPC each, and they will start doing their thing, like go to cover nodes and stuff. But yeah, we'll see that later when we spawn the enemies. For now, we'll have an ally over here. We can keep him pre-spawned like that, like without the spawner. We can have him like that. But it's best to demonstrate how scripted spawn is done in script to show you exactly how it's done properly and in a way that you can manipulate this AI through the level without problems. So, we have a target name price, but now it's better to add another key and value that will help us handle the script part. So this is script noteworthy, and let's just do it price. Think of script noteworthy as the second target name. Think of it something like that. Of course, undeletable, it's explained up here. The AI cannot be deleted to make room for other AI, because the max spawned AI limit in Call of Duty 4 in a Call of Duty 4 map is 32 NPCs. If there are 32 NPCs in a map and you try to spawn more, they will not spawn, and they will either not spawn or delete already existing NPCs to spawn the new ones. Anyway, so we have price with a script noteworthy, we have them undeletable. For spawn is not really necessary. But we can check it anyway. Enemy info. It's all good to have if you have a hero that you want to stay with full credibility of spawning, for example, throughout the map. It's good to have them all checked. Okay, so price is ready to be spawned. Let me just place some path nodes beforehand, so we can do more stuff in the code. Now, let me filter in path nodes. As you can see, this is our filter. We enable it with F, like I said in the previous part. Okay, so path nodes are basically the well-known nav mesh. Now, Call of Duty 4 has path nodes, and it automatically creates binds between all these purple, pink path nodes, which allow NPCs to walk in these surfaces. Now, be very careful with path nodes to again have them just a little bit above ground, and never ever let two path nodes overlap to each other, because your compiler will show you an error. It will say those two path nodes overlap. You will have to unmerge them or whatever. If they're one inside the other, it's even worse. You can check that. If you do this, you can select one, you can move it out, and then you have two separate ones in different positions. It's very important to avoid this error for you, so you won't waste time fixing errors. So as you can see, I changed my grid, and I just try to make a path like good enough for the NPC to walk. We don't need too many nodes. It's a pretty simple pathway. You see the spacing I'm using. It's a very sufficient spacing that I'm using right now. I'm just trying to make it not too crowded, not too compact and stuff. We just try to make a very sufficient enough path node count. Like, you don't have to put too many of them. It's not really necessary. just enough so they can walk around. Like, we can see the binds in game with some commands. I may show it later, I don't know if it's really worth it. So yeah, so now this area can be walked from our NPC. However, he won't go anywhere because nobody tells him, or no system is there to tell him to go anywhere. So the way we move NPCs is through goal nodes or cover nodes. So if we go to the 2D menu here, if we click to node, we have a series of nodes we can select. The most classic and default one is guard, which is just the NPC standing there. That's all there is. It's just the NPC standing there. Now, nodes give us the choice to select the stance that the NPC will have when using this node to cover. Of course, this is not a cover node, but it can work as a goal node. Anyway, if we press N, we can see some settings we have over here, some checkbox for the node. We have not stand. This will make the NPC crouch and aim. If we don't have not stand on, he will just stand and aim. If we have both of them, don't stand, don't crouch, he will just prone and aim. And if we have none of them and just idle, he will just stand in idle, just waiting to see what comes next. Same with the crouch, if it's just crouch idle. There are many other poses we can... There are not many other poses, I mean, to set. So yeah, this is more or less all we can do with this node. It's a very practical, very generic, very basic node that we can use for casual phases. For example, let's say we want the NPC to go here and wait for us to open the door. Just aim at the door, don't prone, don't crouch, don't idle, just stand and aim to the door, wait for us to open it. This is what this node will be, for example. We can delete those two, they are spare. Okay, should we put one more there? No, it's not. Okay, so now what other nodes do we have? What nodes we will need, actually? Cover, undercover, node cover, that's what I mean. We have a series of nodes we will need. The ones we will need are crouch, left, right, and stand. I will explain what all of these do. I'll just place them here and show you exactly what they are. Cover, crouch, left, cover, node, cover, stand, node, cover, right. Okay, that's all of them. So, first of all, nodes have direction. Like I showed you in the rotation part before, we press R, we can rotate the player view, even the NPC view when he spawns, he can have a specific view or target. So same with the nodes, at least the cover nodes. The path nodes, we don't really care about their direction because they're just to link everything else. So cover nodes, let's take this one. Let me just filter in names. If you press F and press names, you can see what each entity is, but sometimes it gets messy. That's why it's good to disable it when you have too many things. So we can see what everything is right now. We see cover stand, this is a stand cover, this is a crouch cover, this is cover right, this is cover, this is cover left. So what are these, each one of these? So first of all, cover, I have to cover stand. We cover crouch, node, cover, crouch, there we go. So first of all, the easy ones, cover left, cover right. Okay, so let's rotate it and you can see it points where the NPC will look towards when using this cover node. That means this is the direction where the NPC will be fighting. This is the direction where you want to set the node to fight towards. Like if you have enemies here, you will rotate the node this way. If you have enemies here, you rotate it this way. Now, what this node does, where this node is useful, is in corners. If you have a corner like this, you want the NPC to stand and look out of the corner and shoot out of the corner where necessary. And the corner direction is this way. The left means that the NPC leans towards the left side to look out of the corner. That means that the corner is going towards the left. And exactly the opposite with the right node, cover right, as you can see here. We can put it here, for example, properly rotated. Over here, cover right, which means that the NPC will lean towards the right and see towards this area. to shoot if there are enemies, or just wait for the player or something. Okay, so that's all we can do with those two nodes. I'll put a left one here, because we'll make the NPC, upon spawn, we'll make the NPC go to that node. Okay, and now let's go to the cover nodes, which are actually simpler than the cover left and right. So cover stand, let's rotate it. Cover stand and cover crouch are placed usually behind obstacles, because they are actually where AI will hide when fighting behind obstacles. For example, this is a wall that is as tall as 48 units. By the way, 1 unit equals to 1 inch. So 48 unit tall obstacles are ideal for cover stand node. Cover stand node, the animations and the preset they have for the NPCs for the stand node, for the cover stand node, is ideal for 48 grid long tall actually walls. So whenever you have a 48 tall obstacle and you want your NPC to hide behind it, you will have to put a node cover stand behind it and look towards the area you want it to find. You can just put nodes like that. I mean, you can just put multiple nodes like that, one next to the other, just as long as they don't overlap. And the same thing on the opposite side. Doesn't matter if they're like that. Doesn't really matter. So we can just do this. It's no harm. And do the same over here, just copy and paste. But this is a shorter wall. So this is a 32 unit tall wall, which is ideal for crouch nodes, for cover crouch nodes. So we'll just have to select all of these, press N, and change their class name with extreme caution to crouch. Gotta get the name right. If you don't know what names these nodes are, don't do any edits here. I know what I'm doing, so yeah, trust on my end. So the same thing here, we copy our crouch nodes, we converted these nodes to crouch nodes because we changed their class name. We can delete this one, just keep copying the crouch nodes. Again, crouch nodes are best for shorter walls to 32 units high walls, and stand nodes are best for taller walls to 48 units high obstacles and stuff. And there we go, our little fighting area here has sufficient nodes and cover nodes for a fight to take place. As you can see, I did some distancing between the nodes, because you never know, they may be overlapping without us noticing. And okay, we can start scripting, but I prefer to place the enemies first. So what I will do is to place an enemy team that will spawn in this area and go to these nodes to fight us. So let's go and do it. Actor, enemy, let's go to Merc, SMG, MP5. Or should we do it P90? Okay, we'll do MP5 and P90. I will just duplicate this one, press N, and change the weapon to P90. This is a class name I know that exists, so that's why I changed it from here instead of going through the actor classes again, because I know it exists. If you don't know if it exists, you can't just type anything, because it won't exist, and you will have this, and this will cause compiling errors. Do not create your own stuff, and always be careful not to write something that is not needed in Worldspawn. It may cause your map to be broken. So we just want spawner for these because we want them to spawn from this position, and we will put like 6 of them, like 2 MP5, like 3 and 3, 3 MP5s, 3 P90s. This is the enemy team. Let's just make them a little bit closer to each other. Try to not make them too close to each other, because this will cause something called telefrag, like that's how I read it in the error that I got, which means that the NPCs are one on top of the other and they try to spawn, and it's glitching the system, and it tells you that you can't do that. It disallowed the spawn to prevent glitches. Anyway, moving on, we have to give them all the same target name. We have to name them all the same way with target name. Target name, enemy force, enemy team actually. 1, enemy team 1. There we go. And when will we want these guys to spawn? Let's see. Let's say that when player passes through this trigger, these enemies will spawn. Simple enough, right? So what we have to do here is either select the trigger and then select one of the enemies and press W. This, when having one entity selected and then having another entity selected, and by pressing W, you set the second entity to be a target of the first entity. What this means is that in Radiant you have the function to make entities target of other entities, like we just did. You can either do that by pressing W like I demonstrated, or by pressing N, giving a target name to one entity, then selecting the other entity, just putting in target value key and the value of the entity you want to target. Now, since they all have the same target name, they are all targeted from the trigger. And remember, the trigger must target the NPCs, not the NPCs the trigger. Try not to confuse that. And whenever you have a trigger selected to NPCs, that means that you want to spawn them with that trigger, which also means that you need to have trigger spawn checked, which is very important. Okay, having this checked and having NPCs with spawner selected targeted from the trigger means that these AIs will spawn once player passes through the trigger without any use of code at all. I hope it's simple so far. So, with this done, our NPCs will spawn, but nobody will go in any node. We need to find a way to tell them to go to the given nodes. So, let me just make this trigger a little bit thicker, just for this reason. Now, what I wanted to say, I wanted to say that whenever you have a trigger, and you have trigger spawn selected here in the checkbox, and you have no AI targeted, this will cause crashes. So always make sure that you don't forget your trigger multiple, that you don't forget to uncheck the trigger spawn from the trigger multiple whenever you don't use it for spawn purposes. That said, we can move to the pathfinding part. Now, we will use two methods to make the NPCs move. One of them will be the script, which will be pretty easy, and color groups, which is maybe even easier. Both have their own advantages and disadvantages. The script method of moving AIs to nodes gives you full control of the NPC. You can fully control what it does. It's perfect for scripted sequences and stuff. The color groups method is great for like battle sequences, like how NPCs will spawn and stuff. So what we will do is we will make price be a scripted. We will move price with script in the nodes, and we will move enemies with color groups just to have a variety. Now, we have a target name for price, but we now need to give target name to the nodes. Let's give target name to this node. Target name node 1, just node 1. You can see there's a green outline to the nodes which are given target name. Pretty useful. Node 2 over here. Then node 3. And node, let's say one of them, 4. Okay, let's put a node 5 as well. Let's just copy the cover left node, place it here in the corner, and then rename it to node 4. Wait, was it 4? What was the last one? It's this one. It's 4. Okay, node 5. There, you see? You can easily make two of the same, and then you will have some scripting errors, which can be easily solved if you find the duplicated name you have. Anyway, so now we have the nodes of price target given target names. And in script, I'll show you how to make him move. Now, let's just go and do it directly. We have to go to our code over here, like we saw previously. Let's just wait for it to open. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our code, we have the stuff we did with the objectives and stuff. And as you remember, I have a setup ally function, which goes down here. There we go. Here we will define our NPC, we will spawn our NPC, and we will give that NPC some values. First of all, like I promised, we have to give him a name. Oh, what am I doing? I have to spawn him first. So, we want this NPC to spawn regardless if player is looking at it. So let's get the target name with getEnt. You know, the getEnt that we talked earlier. That's how we define entities from the editor to our map script. So it's price equals to getEnt price. So we have the spawner defined. To spawn the AI from that spawner, we have to call either doSpawn function or Stalingrad spawn. No, this is not a joke. This is an actual function built in the game. Now, what the difference is between Stalingrad spawn and doSpawn? In short, doSpawn will spawn the AI if the player cannot see it spawn. Stalingrad spawn will spawn the AI regardless if player can see the spawner or not. This is necessary for some of the Infinity Ward's earlier games, so they kept this like that. So we will use Stalingrad spawn because the price AI will spawn right as we spawn, so we don't care if we see him spawn or not, and it's for educational purposes now, so we don't care much. Now I will have to wait 1 frame. This is the lowest time you can wait. 0.05 seconds is the lowest time you can wait in the code. This is 1 code frame, as we like to say. So after waiting for this, we wait actually for the AI to spawn. There are better ways to do it, but this is my way. This works for me. It will hopefully work for you. So after waiting for the spawn will take this long. After waiting for the spawn, we will have to define the AI that has spawned from the spawner entity, because the spawner entity and the AI that spawned are not the same. To do this, we will have to call the script noteworthy key and value that we added, which is why we added it. And the way to do this is that we will have to do, let's say, price again equals. It's okay that we reuse the name, because once we reuse the name to reassign a new entity to it, this is not valid anymore, so it's not really doing any damage, so it's fine. And now instead of getEnt, we will have to call this get_living_AI in brackets. Now in the brackets, in the parameters, we will put price and then script noteworthy. There we go. Just like target name, just like a second target name, only with getLivingAI. This only works for AIs that are spawned. This doesn't work for other entities as far as I tested. Okay, so now our AI is spawned. Our AI is ready to be used in the code. We have defined our spawned AI in the code and we are ready to do stuff with it. What is really useful is to make the AI a global variable, the AI object in the code. To make the AI accessible in every function of your code, you can just put the word level dot in front of the name of the object that it is. Make sure that level dot is not referring to any other objects with the same name, just in case. So level price will now be able to be used everywhere in our script actually. So with that said, we can start putting some stuff to our AI. First of all, let's make it invincible. Let's make it have infinite health, which can be done by calling this function thread magic bullet shield. This function comes from this file. So if you don't have this file included, the magic bullet shield infinite health for AI will not work. Next, let's put the name. Let's put a custom name. Name equals. That's how we put the name to our AI from the script. Now, if we want to put it from the editor, we just have to select the spawner, press N, press script friend name, and then let's just say price or capped price. Script friend name is the key in value that will tell what name will be displayed when aiming on the AI that will be spawned from the spawner. We can change the name over here, for example. So we can just, to experiment with this, we can just change the name once we pass through this trigger. For example, now it will become the price. Let's then make it just price, for example. Or gas, or I don't know, we will see. So this just puts a blank name. This just makes the AI have no name at all. I'll just keep this here commented. This means that the code will not read this line, these two slashes over here. And you can see the highlight anyway. So next, what we need to set is actually nothing. Actually, our AI is ready to be used in our code. So in our script flow over here, in our sequence, we want our AI to go to this first node once it spawns. Actually, we can do this in the function over here. So let's define the node, which is node 1 equals not getEnd. With nodes, you should not use getEnd. You should use getNode instead. And then just target name and the target name you put in the editor. Simple as that. Node 1, don't forget to copy paste it. So get node instead of target name for nodes. Very important. Don't forget that. And then to make price, to make the price AI go to that node, to tell him to go to that node, it's this function, set goal node. There we go. And then node 1 in the parentheses, in the parameter part. Now this will make price go to that node. Pretty simple, well, upon spawn of course. And having that said, let's just copy these lines. And like I said, when we pass through this trigger 1, we want price to go to node 2. So if we go scroll up, we have trigger 1, wait till trigger 1. Once player passes through trigger 1, define node 2 and make price go to node 2. Once the door is open, it will connect paths like I explained earlier, and then node 3, price go to node 3, node 3. Let's just confirm it's node 3, perfect. And then we have our second trigger, trigger 2. We'll just copy the wait over here. Oh, copy all of it actually. Right here, we wait for trigger 2, changing the name, and go to node 4 this time. There we go. Okay, this is it. Now basically the AI will follow us to the given nodes after the given triggers are activated. Okay, we have node 5 of course, but we will do node 5 after the enemies are dead, which is a little bit more tricky, but I will walk you through it. Okay, let's test everything so far. So what we should see now is the AI being spawned. Of course we won't see it because it's just a fragment of a second. So we will just see the AI spawn with a specific name. Then I forgot to do the name thing, I promised. So after we pass the first trigger, we change the name to just, oh actually let's do it here, capped. Okay, let's just do it price like I said. It's okay. Just price. This is not necessary to be a localized string for some reason. I don't know why, but the game supports this. Anyway, so we change the name upon the first trigger. We also tell it to go to this node. When we open the door, paths are connected, AI goes to this node. When we pass through this trigger, enemies will spawn and our ally AI will go to this node. However, I haven't showed you how to make these AIs go to these nodes. Now, normally they will automatically go to the nodes because their AI system will look for cover, and there is cover near them. But a more controlled way to do this is through the previously mentioned color groups. Color groups work with triggers and nodes. You just have a trigger and a group of nodes selected. Let's say all these nodes facing towards us, towards the player area. Then hold Shift and G, and this window will pop up. Now this is the color group window. All you need to know are these two buttons these buttons with the colors, this add, and this OK button. These are all you need to know from this. Anything else is not really necessary for you. So let's just choose red color. We have allies, we want axis, not allies, because our team here is axis. Red, axis, have the node selected, have the trigger selected, only trigger and nodes. Click add and OK. Now we're not done yet. Now if I select this, we can see that this trigger has a color group for these nodes, which means that any AI that has the color group red assigned, when the player passes through this trigger, this AI will go in one of those 3 nodes. And now all we gotta do is set color group to all these guys, which is done this way: script force color R. Okay, I made a mistake. There we go. Force color must be one word. That was my mistake. We can delete the one I did by mistake. Okay, so it's script force color R, the first letter of the color, red. If you put a letter here that doesn't correspond in one of these colors, it will crash. Reading will crash, unfortunately. So be careful when you type the color letter here. And as you can see, they're already marked on the bottom. If I hide this node, you can already see that they're red. So since we have, if we press N on the trigger window, we can see that the script color axis are 0. This is the these are the nodes marked with script color axis are 0, which any colored axis spawner with red will go to anyway. It should be clear enough. I mean, yeah, I did go too far with it, explaining it, but let's see it in action. Everything I explained should work the way they should. Just compile the map because we did tons of changes. It shouldn't take too long, nothing really important was added. No reflections required. Let's hope I don't have any syntax mistakes. I usually don't have. Okay, this is nothing important. You shouldn't be worried about this. This is a stupid console error. Nothing really to be worried about. It's annoying, I know, but you can just ignore it. Nothing will happen. And run selected map, and let's just hope everything will be fine. Yeah, before we click run selected map, I forgot to check paths, connect paths. So we will have to check connect paths when we add paths if we expect paths to be connected and we expect NPCs to be able to walk. So let's just rebuild BSP with the connect paths checked. This will pop up the SP tool window, which is where the SP tool is used, along with the compile tools. This is it. This is all it does. It connected the paths. It didn't even take too long because we don't have many paths. Like I said, this is nothing to worry about, and now let's just see if it works. Let's see. Like I said, Price spawns. He wasn't supposed to spawn if I didn't do the script thing. But now he just spawned, he went to the node like we told him in the script to do so. Now if I pass this trigger, he will go next to the door and wait for us to go through it. There we go. He just waits for us to open the door, but before we open the door, the sequence requires us to take those documents. Got the documents, objective is done. Now we can open the door. And we can see that the AI can walk through it because the nodes are connected. And now the AI waits for the corner. Like I said, cover corner right makes the AI stand like this, and so on. Anyway, so now if I pass through this trigger, if I've done everything correctly, if I didn't forget something, enemy AI will spawn from this corner. They will go cover over there to the walls. They will use color groups. Our AI uses script to move to the nodes. So let's just see if all that works. Okay, this is a sound error. Don't mind that. It's very annoying, but I'll show you how to fix. Let's just put God mode. Just as I promised, our AI also cannot die because it's infinite health. Yeah, it will avoid grenades if needed. But he won't be able to die. It's basically invisible. But the enemies can easily get pawned. as simply as that. Yeah, we have these errors are easy to go around. I'll show you how. So yeah, this basically works. This is the first little combat that we managed to make with all the details necessary to be explained. Let me just exit the game. Now, first of all, let's fix the sound error. It's pretty easy. We just have to change something here in the zone file. Let me just get the line real quick. Okay, so I found the line. It's, as you can see, sound, RU, Battlechatter, your map name, your level name, you should be able to see it here, and comma all SP. Now let's just replace the map name with our map's name, test map 1, and then as you can see it's RU, which means that it's for the Russian Battlechatter. If you have, for example, US Marines, you will have to do this. You will have to put US Battlechatter. If you have Arab AI, you will need AB Battlechatter. And if you have English Battlechatter, SAS, you will need UK. Those are the 4 Battlechatter systems sound load you need. So yeah, in our one we will just need Russian and UK in case we spawn other NPCs from the SAS team. Okay, save. Okay. Then if we build fast file to apply the change in the zone file, we should be able to hear the enemy scream like, you know, grenade, take cover, in the Russian version, of course. I don't know if Price has anything to shout. I don't think Price is programmed to shout anything because he's a hero NPC. Okay, so really quick, I'm gonna do the sequence really fast. Get the objective documents, go through the door, spawn the enemies. Yeah, you can hear them shout the Battlechatter. That's what these lines did. Of course, Price doesn't seem to have Battlechatter, that's fine, because he's a hero character, that's why. If we spawn random SAS, they will have Battlechatter, which is cool. Okay, so we're done with this part. Let's move to the next one really quick. We want to wait until all these NPCs die, which is something that was really hard for me to figure out in the beginning, in my first days. So yeah, let's just do it here. I will just show you the steps necessary for that. So, these enemies are a group of spawners, a group of spawned AIs with one target name. That means they are an array. What arrays are like groups of the same target name, a group of entities with the same target name. Let's just say this. This is how arrays are usually used. So, since they have all the same name, using getEnd will not work. Our target name here is enemy team 1. Let's put enemy team 1. So getEnd is not gonna work, like I said. So we will have to use getEnd array, which now gets all of these. However, it is still not enough to do something to all of these guys. So since this is a scripted way of waiting for the enemies to die, we will have to spawn them from script, so we have better control of their spawners. So we will just undo the spawn method we used here. So we'll select the trigger, remove the target, and don't forget to remove the trigger spawn, because like I said, there will be crashes if this is checked and there are no targets. We will not need to change their name, we will not need to remove the color groups, those will still work regardless. But we will spawn these enemies in a different way. We will do it from script. Spawning multiple enemies from script is useful because we can wait for their death in the following way. So we have this array of spawner entities. To do something to each and every one of these arrays, we will need to use a for loop. For loops, you can find more about them if you read about C++ and C programming. I'll just show you how the loop is here, what is necessary to be done, and I won't really go in depth to it. So first we need I equals 0, I less than enemy team 1 dot size I plus plus. Okay, so this will basically run a loop through all the objects of this array of entities. And what we will do here is similar to what we did to price over here. We will actually, I will create a second array like that. Don't mind what I do, just pay attention to how I do it. Equals, we need that here as well. It's a lot to explain right now. So that will basically assign the newly spawned enemy team to a new array that we created here, and we can use this array to wait for them to die. So wait till dead enemy team 1. I think this will work. So, and after they die, so our output will be price going to node 5, just so we know that it works. Now, let's just, oh, we have to build fast now, to build BSP and everything to see if our changes get saved. Because we changed, you know, the triggers and stuff. Okay. Those errors we don't need to worry about, and then let's just pray it works. Because I'm pretty sure that's the way I did it. Okay, let's prolong this a little bit. You remember we have the objective, right? We finish this objective here, so when the first objective is done, we can add the second objective, just like that, and I just won't put a location here. I would just put 0, 0, 0, which means no location, because I don't have a valid location to set right now. And then when the enemies are dead, 2 is done. There we go. I just added the objective real quick to make things more complete. And let's see, will they spawn, and will the code wait until they are dead? Let's see. So far so good. As you can see, it works exactly the same way with the trigger, just this time we have more control of them. And as you can see, it waits until they're dead, objective completed, and price goes to the corner. Our script is successful. We managed to do all we had to do to create a simple sequence, and then we can make a trigger here that will simply end our level. But it would be fun to create a small battle in the same way we did so far. So let's just do this real quick and then create an end trigger over there to just finish our level and go back to menu. Let's just jump to Raiden real quick. Just build okay, let me just copy these ones. We don't have color groups. Okay, what is this now? Okay, I prefer the shortened one. It's easier to take out enemies with it. So yeah, just copy this here. We'll have a wide open fight over here. We'll wait for multiple enemy groups to die. It should be fun. Just over here. This is like the ending of our tutorial for now. I won't show any vehicles. It's too complicated. We're here to show in depth the basics, because that's what this is all about. So we have one cover area here. You'll see where this is going. We have now something like a small battlefield. We don't want our player to go through this area before these enemies are dead. So what we're gonna do is to create a script brush model of an invisible wall, which will be a scripted invisible wall which we can delete and allow player to go through this area when the fight is done. However, I will not use clip because that will block NPCs as well, and we do want NPCs to walk through this area. We will use a clip called, in the tools, clip player, which just blocks player. We don't need an origin for it. It's just a scripted brush model that we will just make it disappear. It's an invisible wall. We just clip. We have it as a brush model. No need to put dynamic path. Target name player clip 1. Player clip 1. Oops, wrong button. That's fine. It's here. Player clip 1. So once these guys die, this wall will be disappeared. And I'll do it right now. Wait till dead. There we go. Let me just copy a get end thing. Polluter clip 1. Clip 1. There we go. Get in polluter clip 1. Delete. There we go. We can do the opposite. For example, we want an area to be open and then closed. We can just put this like, let's say 1000 units above, and then just move it 1000 units below with the move Z, because Z is height, with the move Z function, or the move 2 if you have predetermined origins. So yeah, that's all there is to that. We have the clip set to block player from moving onto this position before the time is right, because it's good to prevent our players from going too far ahead if it's not a valid map that supports that, because most of the maps are dynamic. We are restricting players to the location of the fight. It's not really valid for speedrun, for example. Now, what we're gonna do here is to basically spawn some allies and spawn some enemies from here. And when these enemies are dead, we will go to the ending, let's say, door and finish the level. That's basically the plan for this. Let me just lay down nodes real fast. I'll get back to you. Okay, path nodes are set. Let's place our spawners. Let's just make another group of these guys, duplicate them, place them here. Oh, not here, here. Rename them to enemy team 2. Change the force color. We will need a different color. Let's say O for orange, and then duplicate them once again over here and name them team 3, force color yellow, Y, like that. So we have two more teams, two more independent teams that we will see how we will spawn. Okay, now let me just see these walls are fine. Let's now create one small SAS group, ally SAS woodland AR M4, then another one actor ally SAS woodland SMG MP5, those two guys. Not just two of them, we will put like a group of four ally NPCs. They will be spawner, script force color, let's do it green, G for green. And then I'll show you how to assign force colors to through script to price. And then put the target name for this, target name sus team. There we go. Force spawn undeletable enemy info. There we go. That's all we need. So right next to this clip, let's create a new trigger multiple, which will do many things. It will spawn the enemies, it will spawn the allies, and it will move the AI in a specific way with color groups. Okay, so it's target name battle trigger 1. That's how I'll name it. And now we want our let's see. Okay, we will need to set up color groups for this one. The first color groups will be our allies going to these nodes over here. So we will have to select all of them. So we have a variety of nodes to go to. Shift G, and instead of axis, now we have to go allies. Our color is green, so we select green, add OK. So this trigger tells the allies with green force color to go to these nodes. That's as far as it is. And once we pass through this trigger, we will also make price be in the same color group with these guys through script this time, which will be cool. Now, the same trigger should tell enemies to go to these nodes over here, which will be these half of nodes for, oh, it's exactly 6 for orange, but we have to click axis because they're axis, don't forget that. Orange, add OK, and then the same thing for these guys, those 2 nodes and those 4 nodes. Shift G, yellow, axis, add OK. There we go. It's a huge one. You can see it's a huge one, like over here. Then we will have a second trigger over here. If we go through this battle trigger 2, delete the color groups, delete key, pair, This is necessary because we don't need the same properties with the previous trigger because it's a copy. Battle trigger 2, change the target name, and then our allies will go to this node, something like pushing forward. Shift G, green allies, add OK. There we go. Copy the trigger again. Once player goes to this part, maybe even a little bit further back, let's delete that again. Trigger 3, select all of these, deselect the ground, Shift G, allies, green, add OK. But now we will want the enemies to fall back over here, so we will also have to select these, maybe even some of these. Shift G, axis, yellow, orange actually, add OK, and the same thing to the other team, just to give the feeling that they fall back. Axis, yellow, add OK. And there we go. This will make them like go backwards or something. That's all there is to it. Also, it would be nice to make these triggers be touch once, which means that once you go through them, they will not function again, because color groups are always working if the trigger is there. For example, if this trigger tells them to go here and this trigger tells the orange guys to go here, if we pass through this trigger, we tell them to go here, but then we go back to this trigger, they will go back right here. So it's best to have touch once in these color group triggers. So I'll just do that in all of them. Touch once is basically it deletes the trigger once you go through it. So you won't have to worry about the color groups being back. If you backtrack through the level, there won't be any trouble with the AIs going with you, if you don't want that. Okay, so what we are going to do, we are going to make these enemies respawning, and they will stop respawning once you pass through this trigger over here, like that. Let me just rename this to trigger 4, delete the keys and values, and then make our allies go to these nodes with this trigger. Allies, green, add OK. Pretty cool so far. It's gonna be a good run, if it works. So yeah, we now have to make 2 enemy arrays spawn consequently, and when we get to this part, they will stop respawning. Now there's a very nice built-in system for that we just need to do it through the editor. However, unfortunately it requires us to use the trigger spawn method, but it doesn't matter because it will work fine as it is. Which also means that they all have to be the same target name, so my bad for changing them. Didn't really think to find this one, but it's fine. It will work quite alright. So yeah, it doesn't matter that they have different color groups. As soon as they're the same target name, this spawn trigger will spawn them as necessary. Now, if we want the spawners to produce more than one AI, we will have to put this key and value in all of the spawners. Count makes sense, right? 99999. Just this should be more than enough. Almost 10,000. So yeah, that's not all there is though. We have to put some settings in this trigger, because this trigger will make them spawn consequently, and then some settings to this trigger to stop their spawn as needed. Now I don't really use this method, but it will work if we do it properly. So let's select all of our enemies, select target name. This is a nice way, by the way. If you click selection here and select target name, you will select all the entities that have the same target name with the one you selected. Okay, having them all selected over here, we can just put this key script kill spawner and then a number to identify this kill spawner group, which is 1 by the way. And the same key and value must be put in the trigger that will stop their spawning over here, like that. So this trigger stops this spawner from respawning. but in order to make them respawn in the first place, they have to be spawned from a trigger with the target name flawed and secure. Now here is the problem. We want our trigger to have a target name which we want to find in the script. We have to set the flawed and secure target name to spawn the AI, but we can't have more than we can't have a lot of flawed and secure triggers and wait for them individually in our code. So we will have to duplicate this trigger. Just clone it like that and put it like that right here, just a little bit closer to the other one. So this trigger, we will name it target name flawed and secure. And whenever you want respawning enemies, you will have to make you have to add the count key in value, and their trigger spawn must be flawed and secure, the target name of the trigger spawn, flawed and secure. I'm afraid so. I will remove the color groups because we will let color groups happen from this trigger just to keep the variety of things. This will not, oh, this will be also a trigger spawn. This gets a little complicated, this part, but everything makes sense at the end, don't worry. This trigger will spawn our enemies because they spawn once, they don't respawn, they will be with infinite health, don't worry about that. And let's just separate the triggers in a way that we can easily distinguish them. There are tool textures that do nothing, and they are just there to help us tell the difference between triggers. So if I put AI trigger in this one and spawn trigger in this one, we can tell what is what easily. So this one is for allies and for color groups, this one is for enemies, and just loop spawn them. They will both be deleted with touch once, but we don't care about that. Okay, having that ready, we can start coding. Oh, also we can just put this as stop spawn, as it's very accurately portrayed here. The triggers are a little short, but I doubt anyone will ever go as high. Okay, so I think we're ready to code. As you can see, this little battle we did here. Let me just make the ending too as well. Let's say that the ending will be yeah, let me just make something more creative over here, something like that, and then a trigger use touch, for example, over here like that, and I'll name it target name and trigger. There we go. This will be the end trigger, like right here. All of our friends will come with us at the ending like that. There are 5 of them, price and 2 more allies. Select don't crouch, don't prone, and idle. And I will also show you a way to use color groups through script, which is a pretty interesting way. A trigger multiple right above them, like that. Select all of the nodes and the trigger. Shift G, allies, green, add, and OK. Now, nobody can ever reach this part, right? Even if I click no player, nobody will ever be able to get there. So if we do target name and colors, we can define this trigger in script and we can activate it once player kills all the enemies. So our allies can go here once enemies are dead without having to change the color groups or just manually set each NPC to go to each node, which is painful. So yeah, this is mostly all of it. This is how to design a very basic single player map. We will just go and code everything now. It won't be too much. I will explain everything in the way. I do feel I forget. Yes, I forgot to assign stuff to player, like assign weapons, assign hands. That's what I forgot. We will do this now, since it's nicely ready. Okay, we have all our ends here. We can start coding now. So, what we do is we wait for these 2 triggers. Let's see. Okay, we will need to spawn our allies manually, so yeah, we will need to remove the SASTeam target from here and the trigger spawn as well. So yeah, we keep battle trigger as a target name to monitor the event of player going through this trigger, because we can't monitor flood and secure, because we may have later to add more flood and secure triggers, which will make it messy and we can't wait for more than one trigger in code. Anyway, too much. That maybe is too much. Okay, so we wait for this trigger, like I said, trigger battle trigger 1. Just paste it here. Oh, just copy the whole code over here. So I don't have to retype everything. It's more practical this way. Okay, having that done, we can just copy this, paste it here. SASTeam, and their name is, their actual name is, oh, it's SASTeam. SASTeam. Okay, let's do it this way. SASTeam 1. That's how I'll name the other one. SASTeam 1. Thread magic bullet shield. There we go. So once they spawn, once our allies spawn with battle trigger, they will get infinite health. That's all of it. Now, next thing we need to do, we assign a color group to price. So level price set force. Wait, let me just confirm that. Okay, there we go. That's the function we need. It's set force color, and G is the letter we need for green. Now price, it has the same force color from the color groups of our allies, and they will all move together to the same color nodes as needed. Let me just edit this a little bit. Just make this a little bit backwards and make these. Okay, go over here. I'll also make a small protection, so they won't just spawn and see at the enemies at once. Okay, we're done with this one. Back to the script. Now, next thing we wait for is this trigger. It's not necessary to wait for it, but let's just do it. I mean, why not? Trigger 2, 2, 2. If I remember correctly, this is 3, 3, and this is 4. Good, very good. Trigger 3 and trigger 4. And after battle trigger 4, we will have to wait for all the enemies to die. Now we can do it in two ways. We can either somehow define the already spawned AI, or just wait for the whole Axis team to die. Like, there's a function that gets all spawned Axis AIs and waits for them to die. I will just try to find it and get back to you. So yeah, the function I was looking for is basically this one, only with get AI array axis as parameter. This is basically what we need. We will put this after this one, which basically gets every axis AI and waits for it to die at the given moment after this trigger. So since we pass battle trigger 4, enemy AI will stop spawning because battle trigger 4 stops their respawn, which means that then we just have to wait for every axis to die, which is simple enough. Okay, so after they all die, wait till dead, they all dead, we just have to tell our allies to go to this part by enabling this trigger color, this color trigger, like I said. And the way to do this is pretty simple and it's pretty practical. Whoops, there we go. Just copy this, just use the wait till trigger method, just like you wait for the trigger, but instead of wait till, do notify. And this will enable the trigger and make the ally AI go here. And then we just have to copy the code with the press F to do something. Just change the trigger name. So yeah, we just have to do the same thing we did with the wait trigger here. Set a hint string. We will have to send the hint string here. Let me just go to the localizedstrings file. Let's see, English, localizedstrings, and our map file should be the latest one. just press F to end or something. End trig. Press F to end. Press F to end, something like that. And test map 1, like I explained before, trigger off. And when we do this, just how to finish the level, it's really simple. To go back to menu, you just have to do this: change level and close brackets with no name. This will just return you to menu. You can, for example, go to another level, but it's a little bit more to talk about, so I will not show this here, and it's only meant for campaign maps, so yeah. Okay, so change level is basically the end of our level. That's all there is. Now, I did find my code for the weapons and the player stuff. So we have here player, set view model, view hands, black kit. No, we will not need this one. SAS view hands, SAS woodland, actually woodland, view hands, SAS woodland, MP5 silencer, and let's set the secondary weapon to, let's say, Beretta, like that. Now, since these are stuff that are not loaded in our map, we have to open the zone file and load these things manually. So it's the view hands is an X model, so X model, comma, the name of the X model. MP5 silencer is a weapon asset, so weapon, comma, SP slash MP5 silencer. The same thing with Beretta, weapon, comma, SP Beretta, and this should be all it needs for the player. Yeah, so our player will now have the SAS hands, MP5, and Beretta. Okay, with that out of the way, we can resume to see what else is left to do. So we basically did our code, we spawned our allies, we set price to come with our allies, go to the same color groups, all the triggers are set, the final trigger is set. I believe we're ready. I don't know about you guys, but I believe we are ready. I can start compiling our map for hopefully the final time for this tutorial. We have a very little, very small script over here, not much to see. Let's just put those on the top since they are quite small, just to rearrange the script itself. So Introscreen is basically called over here. So yeah, I guess. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show you how to pre-catch stuff. Some of the stuff you use in the map, for example models or weapons, sometimes they need to be pre-catched. It's best to pre-catch them if you use them later in your script. So to pre-catch, let's say the model we set to player, we must do this: pre-catch model. It's a model, so we have to use pre-catch model and the model name like that. Do this above maps load main, which is the core of your script. Now this is for models, and it is of course it goes without saying, of course, that if you pre-catch something here, it must be in the zone file as well. It must be loaded in the zone file. Now the same thing with the weapon, only instead of weapon we type item for some reason, and the same thing with Beretta. I also want to give player frag grenades and flashbangs, so let's do this. A frag grenade, weapon give max ammo, and flash grenade. These have to be the same with the file names of the weapon assets, which can be found right here. Weapons. You obviously want the SP ones since you're modding SP. And you can find various weapons you can use. Most of them are test weapons, some of them don't work. The AC-130 ones, you don't want to mess with those. They are only for advanced usage. Those vehicles ones, you don't need to use those as well. Just RPD, MP5, P90, those are the ones you need to mess with. Anyway, so we have these pre-catched and we have our map compiled. Let's close these folders. No, Word.war, we don't need you. And build fast file and see if everything works. Okay, our fast file is done, and let's test the map. First objective is set. Let's just do God mode, and no, God mode is enough because we don't want to keep dying. Okay, we see our hands changed, our weapon is changed, and we have 3 weapons. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. To avoid that, you can just, where we give player his weapons, we can do a level player take all weapons beforehand, so we can clear out any other weapons he has before that part. So yeah, our player starts with the default loadout that the test map gives him, which is MP5 and Marine hands, the base hands, and then we switch to the MP5. Now we end up having the second MP5 as well, and M9 anyway. That's fine though. 3 weapons, why not? We take the documents, we open the door, we have flashbangs on the lower corner if you see. We spawn the first group of enemies. Take him out like that, pretty casually. Just typical Call of Duty, you know. Objective completed, push through enemy lines. We could put a third objective here, but we didn't. And then this is the final part where when we pass through this trigger, the enemies will keep respawning and our allies will respawn with infinite health. Let's just see if all that works or if I just messed it up in the way. Okay, so it turns out that these enemies are way too many for flood and secure, so we just have to remove half of them. Like that. I had to show you how to quick save, so after the first team is dead, we will want to quick save right before we do anything else after the wait. So save game, just empty. I usually write the word now, which is sometimes necessary to have a word here. So just save game now as the name of the save. That should be enough, and your game is saved like that. Now we will see if everything works. I just reduced the number of enemies in the spawners. Looks like Flood and Secure spawns more AIs than the spawners themselves. Okay, there we go. Finally, let's just see if this thing works. Our allies spawn. Regular SAS troopers with price. Yeah, they all just move dynamically to the paths they should move. They're moving quite nice, and they're fighting even better. They all have infinite health, of course. The enemies are shooting at me. I just have God mode to present to you this thing. And when we move a little bit forward, they also move because we have the color triggers, if you remember. And if we move him forward, they will also move with us, pushing the enemy back. And now, hopefully the enemies, whenever they spawn and go even further backwards. Like that. And when I pass through this trigger, the enemies will stop spawning. I think I already did it. And when the final one dies, our allies will move up to these stairs. Oh, okay. Up to these stairs and wait for me to press the button. Oh, it's taller than I remember. Press F to end. So there we have it. The end over there. There we have it. This is a very basic single player map, like extremely basic with a lot of details. I explained it as much as I could. This Flood and Secure may be a little bit unstable sometimes. Keep an eye out for that. I hope it doesn't cause any trouble to anyone who may try it. So yeah, right now I press F and we return to the main menu. Just like that. So that basically sums everything up. We have this little test map, which is frankly not a lot of code. It's a very basic map in my terms. It has a very basic stuff to it. I can just close everything. We can just stay on Radiant for the end. So yeah, you can see this is a very basic map. Very simple things for you to learn. Yeah, I think it's a great example for you guys to experiment with. So that will be all. I don't want to stretch it any further. The tutorial is already a couple hours, even more. And yeah, it will hopefully be a great base and documentation that people can run to understand this thing if they actually want to spend time on this, because yeah, Also, what I did notice is that we didn't put path nodes here, yet they managed to connect. Maybe it's not too far for them. That's cool. That's cool. Since it worked, we have no trouble with it. So yeah, as you can see, I reduced the amount of the enemies here because Flood and Secure spawns more AI for some reason anyway. So, that's all from me. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you found that interesting. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your help. And hope this was interesting. Hope this was useful. Hope this gets really this really helps people with their exploration of Call of Duty 4 tools. Thanks everyone for watching and take care. Bye bye.